Hello and welcome everybody to the Whatever Whenever podcast, episode 3, part 2, in our tribute to Neil Peart and Rush. In this part 2 of the series, I'm going to be taking you through all the music, all the records, all the live performances, videos, all of that stuff. Yesterday was more really about my own personal experience and journey with Rush and with what Neil meant to me. So in this episode, we're going to be delving into really what matters the most, and that is the music, the material, the songs, the lyrics, all of that. So strap in and get ready for another one. Again, like I said yesterday, anyone can listen to this. I don't really care, but really this is really for the hardcore fans and the people who love the music and the band and the man as much as I do. So we're going to get right into it for you today. I had mentioned on part 1, I was talking about the instructional drumming video that Neil had made, and I went through my collection last night and found the disc. The name of that collection is called Taking Center Stage. Neil Peart, Taking Center Stage. One of many instructional drum videos that he came out with, but that's the one for me that I think is the best. And I really think it's one, too, that you can watch and enjoy, even if you're not a drummer, even if you're just a fan. It's really cool because it has a lot of, a lot of him talking, a lot of him explaining methodologies behind the stuff that he did as far as drumming and whatnot goes, and the thinking behind it. And also it has something very unique where they did like a drum cam. I think it was during the Snakes and Arrows tour. So you get like camera angles and shots of just Neil during the song, so you can see everything that he's doing. Because of course, when you watch a concert video, they're going back and forth, jumping back and forth between the band members and the crowd and everything. This is just completely dedicated to Neil. So you really get a unique view into his drumming on that. So Taking Center Stage is the name of that. I couldn't remember the name of it yesterday on the show. It's interesting that Rush being a Canadian band, and I think a lot of Canadians either forget this, don't know it, or want people to forget about it, because they're by far, the biggest Canadian export of all time, besides hockey. I think it's the biggest thing Canada's given us besides hockey is Rush. But, a lot of Canadians want you to forget. They want you to forget the fact that initially Canada didn't want Rush. Canada wanted nothing to do with Rush. They didn't want them. Of course, now they're ours. Well, lest you forget, Canada, you wanted nothing to do with Rush. They couldn't get arrested in Canada when they first started. In fact, it was the United States of America. It was America who first embraced Rush and first got them on the road to success. It was Donna Halper at the radio station in Cleveland that first played Working Man on the radio. She had gotten a copy of the first album, which a lot of people forget at that time was an independent. Everybody thinks about indie records and indie rock and indie records now. A lot of people forget that first Rush record was an indie release on Moon Records, which is just a made-up record name. A lot of people, that's a trick a lot of musicians learn through the years. I certainly learned that when I was an up-and-coming musician, is that you could get, if you just put you made your demo album or something, your demo record, and you just put a made-up record name on there, booking agents and clubs and stuff would be more likely to book you and give you a gig if you had some kind of record label name on it. Didn't matter if it was made up. Didn't matter if it was really non-existent. But even if, because they didn't know the difference between a major label and indie label or anything else. So if you just put a name, that's what they did. They put Moon Records on there, which was just a name, that made up fake record name that they gave themselves to get themselves some attention. So they didn't even have a record deal. That album was fully funded by the band and by their management. And then they shopped it around before getting a deal with Mercury Records. And that was, so yes, Canada, you gave us Rush, but it was a two-way street in getting them off the ground and out there. And America's role in that, was really huge. So we're going to go through, later in the show, we're going to go through all the albums. I might not necessarily go through every single song on every record, but I'm going to do my best to go through the majority of all the songs, at least give a quick comment on each song. Maybe some of the later ones I won't go through all of the songs, but we're definitely going to go through all the records today, front to back. And we're going to start by going through my personal favorites from in all the categories. One of the questions that I get the most from people, either from people that know I'm a Rush fan, people who are wanting to get into Rush, or people who, who are already fans and want to know, everybody, what's your favorite this, what's your favorite that? Man, it's so difficult. It is so difficult to do that. It really is, because I honestly, I like all their albums. I like everything they've done in some way or the other. Of course, you're always going to have favorites. You're always going to have ones you're going to like more than others. You're always going to have ones you're going to go listen to more than others. But I really do. I really do like almost everything they've ever done. And I'll get more into that once we start going album by album and stuff. But it's difficult, especially when, I don't know what's more difficult. I think it's actually it's probably easier to select, just pick one song. Okay, what's your favorite song? Well, that's hard. What's your favorite record? Well, again, because it's trying to put one over the other, it doesn't really do it justice. Favorite song, I've had to pick one favorite song, gun to my head, one favorite song. I would say probably Natural Science off of Permanent Waves, which, by the way, again, I didn't realize this yesterday when I did part one of this two-part series. Today, actually, January 14th, 2020, today is the 40-year anniversary of the album Permanent Waves. It was released 40 years ago today, on this day. And so, fittingly, in trying to think of what my favorite song would be, I'd have to say Natural Science off of Permanent Waves. And the reason that I would say that's my favorite song is because, well, to me, it has everything. It has everything that, to me, that represents Rush. It has, it's really a three-part suite, really. And I was lucky enough to see them perform it live a couple of times, which I'm grateful for. And I just think it has everything. It's it's one of the longer multi-part compositions, and really one of the last. Permanent Waves is one of many transitional records for Rush. It was the record that, coming off of Hemispheres, which was the third from 2112. Well, it really started, it started before that, but almost initially right out of the gates, when Neil first joined the band, they began to shift. Again, we'll talk more about that once we go track by track. Permanent Waves, to me, has everything. It has everything, to me, that represents Rush. It has the thematic long piece. It has the complexity, the musical complexity and shifting in the time signatures, and in the virtuosic playing of all the members. And gosh, just thematically, the lyrics to me of Natural Science are representatory not only of Rush overall. If you really dive into those lyrics and you really understand what's being said, they are representatory not only of just of the band, but of all existence. That's what that song is about. It's about life itself, societies, cultures, planets, arising out of nothing and evolving up and becoming, sentient beings and aware, conscious individuals that evolve into these societies that start at a basic level and then evolve up. And then in the end are washed away again. Because it starts out with tidal pools and the microcosmic, little galaxies, and it goes into the DNA, wheels within wheels in a spiral array, a pattern so grand and complex. Time after time, we lose sight of the way. Our causes can't see their effects. And then the end, permanent waves. Here comes the great flood. It washes all that progress and society away again, and then starts all over. It's so fucking deep. And that's the other thing. That's the other thing I didn't really mention yesterday with Rush. To me, Rush too. They are the ultimate. They're the ultimate weed smoker band. I mean, I've met a lot of people through the years who smoke weed and they don't listen to Rush. I'm like, what the fuck are you doing with your life? The fuck are you doing with your life? You smoke weed and you don't listen to Rush? The fuck are you doing with your life? Give me a fucking break, dude. Roll up a fucking Fatty Boom Batty and listen to fucking Permanent Waves, please. That shit's on repeat. They were one of the first rock bands. Everybody gives credit to nowadays a lot to, modern bands and stuff about groups that are weed smokers and stuff like that. But I don't think Rush gets enough credit for having one of the first weed smoking songs. The first song on the B-side of 2112, A Passage to Bangkok. Our first stop is in Bogota to check Colombian fields. The natives smile and offer us a sample of the yield. Sweet Jamaican pipe dreams, golden Acapulco nights. The whole thing is about we only stop for the best. They go all just name checking all the different places where we've been smoked in Lebanon. We burn the midnight oil. That's what it's about. I don't think they get enough credit for. And in fact, they admitted that the second record. I'm sorry, the third record that they made would have been the second record. What I meant to say, the second record with Neil, Caress of Steel. And again, we'll get into that when we go into all the breakdowns. Not one of my favorites, but the band admitted that they were fucking destroyed on hash though when they were making that record. So I don't know. It's always funny to me when I meet somebody. Oh man, I smoke so much weed, man. I meet stoners and like, yeah, you listen to Rush. Oh no, I never listen to Rush. What the fuck are you doing with your life? What are you doing with your life? You listen to fucking Dark Side of the Moon 5,000 times, trying to sync it up to fucking Wizard of Oz, but you never listen to fucking Put On Permanent Waves or 2112 and Smoke the Big Fatty. What the fuck are you doing? What are you doing with your life? Jesus. So yeah, Natural Science, I would have to say, it's just got everything. But again, it's so tough. It's so tough to pick one song. But I think it's easier to pick one song than it is for when someone asks you the next question, which is, what's your favorite Rush record? Man, that's so tough. It really is. I mean, that might change day to day, week to week, month to month, year to year. Who knows? So I thought I would, instead of trying to nail down one, I'd give you a top 10. And that's even tough because, again, it's easier for me to name the records that are my least favorites, which aren't that many, to be honest with you. Caress of Steel, not one of my favorites, although I like Caress of Steel because it's still got a few good songs on it. But overall, it's not one I reach for and listen to very often. Past that, God. Past that, you'd have to go well into the 90s to get to another one that would be my least favorite. So I'd say Caress of Steel, and then a Tessera Echo album is not one of my favorite albums, but it's got great songs on it, and I saw both legs of that tour, and it was phenomenal. That's the thing about Rush, though. Their albums, a lot of their albums were just an excuse for them to go out and play live. And if you necessarily didn't like one of their albums, one of the studio albums, if you went to the concert for that tour, it was amazing. And a lot of the songs translated better live than they did in the studio versions. They're one of those rare bands where, even though they made some phenomenal records, I think they were always a better live band than they were a studio band. So, like I said, Tessera Echo, not one of my favorite studio albums, not one I listen. I don't really like the sound of the record that much, but it's got some songs. For instance, the song Tessera Echo, I remember that actually got played on the radio a lot here, on the rock station locally here when it came out. That was, I didn't like the studio version's okay, but the live version's just slamming. The song Resist off of Tessera Echo is, I never really liked the studio version of that, but later when they started doing an acoustic version of it, a stripped down version of it, phenomenal song. I talked yesterday about Vapor Trails. Vapor Trails is not one that I reach for and listen to oftentimes, but like I said, when they came out with that remixed, redo version of it, they really improved that record and really gave it its just desserts, and made it sound, how they couldn't make it sound initially. But still, there were some great songs on there, and that was sort of their comeback record. Past that, the final studio record, Clockwork Angels, it's another one where I'm not a huge fan of the sound of that record. It was just way too hot. It was mastered too hot, right on the red line. It sounds distorted and overdriven in some places. But live, the songs live were pretty good. Were good. And it has the song The Garden, which I knew, I got to tell you, the first time I heard the song The Garden, when it came out in 2012, I cried then. I don't know how I knew, but when I first heard that song, this is long before they had even, announced they weren't going to tour anymore. 3 years before that. And long before, Neil had his cancer and all that stuff. Somehow, I don't know whether it was like an intuition thing or whatever it was. The first time I heard that last song on Clockwork Angels, which now has ended up being the final Rush studio track on the final Rush studio album, I cried because I knew it. I don't know how I knew it. I knew it. I knew that was it. I knew that was the end of the band. I knew that was somehow Neil's swan song. That was somehow his goodbye. And it's amongst the best songs they've ever done. It really is. And it's one that's really having a big effect on a lot of people right now in the in the days since his passing. So I mean, that's a pretty good, that's what, 3 albums out of 20 something. All the rest of them I like. Counterparts, like I said, I love that tour. I like a lot of the songs on there. I don't find myself listening to Counterparts a lot, but it had some great songs on it. Very important record for the band. And so, I mean, honestly, that's very little. But let's go through now. This is difficult. And but I'm going to go through here, and I'm going to give you my top 10 favorite records from Rush. Number 1. Oh, so difficult. Now, again, it's hard to put any one of these over the other ones, but number 1, I just have to say Permanent Waves. Permanent Waves, just for the songs. Again, it's a transitory record for the band. Everybody would, 98%, probably 99% even, of people making a top 10 list of Rush albums would definitely have Moving Pictures in number 1, in the number 1 spot, because it was their most commercially successful record. It was their biggest selling record. And it's, we'll get to it. It's front to back. Great record. But Permanent Waves is the transitory record that went from, that made the jump from them doing the longer thematic songs into shorter, more accessible songs that were more, pop and radio oriented, but still had all the classic things you wanted from Rush in it. It starts out with The Spirit of Radio. It's a perfect record. I really tried to judge my favorite records in my top 10 list by the albums that have, to me, the most amount of unskippable songs. Meaning, I listen to the whole record and I don't skip one song and don't, ignore one song. Permanent Waves, again, it starts with Spirit of Radio, it ends with Natural Science. Today is the 40-year anniversary of the release of that record. So, for the number 1 slot, I'm going Permanent Waves. Number 2, of course, Moving Pictures. Again, if you had to, people always ask me, well, what album should I start with? If I'm going to get into Rush, what should be the first record I get? And I think probably 99% of all people would say Moving Pictures. It was their most commercially successful album to date. It was the album that broke them through into the mainstream in a mega way. It's a flawless record front to back. It really is. So yeah, definitely number 2. Again, we're going to go track by track, so I'll go into more detail on these records when we get to that. Number 3, Grace Under Pressure from 1984. I forgot to mention yesterday when I was discussing sort of all the, the early days of when I first got into Rush, and in sort of the first albums that I got, because I talked about how Moving Pictures was the only one I had for many years. Then I got some cassettes and stuff. I'd forgot I was talking about watching wrestling and stuff on my grandparents' the big, console TV and stuff. A lot of you may remember my grandparents also had one of those big, they were like wooden console, stereos. that was the cool thing about home electronics back then. They were pieces of furniture. They weren't like now, these tiny little plastic boxes or, whatever, thin little plastic things. Man, fucking home electronics back then was fucking furniture, dog. You had to have a fucking 5-man crew to move that shit. It was a piece of furniture. They were made out of wood. They were heavy. They lasted for fucking ever. You bought one of those things, you were secure that you weren't going to have to buy anything else for a long time. They lasted forever. In fact, those big console TVs, if they would go out, I know my grandparents and my parents too, that had one. If the picture tube went out, you just fucking replaced the part in it and kept the TV. It wasn't like now where you just go out and buy and You can go buy a fucking 55-inch 4K TV for $400 on Amazon. Well, this shit was expensive back then. It was an investment. When you got it, you were going to have it for a long time. And I remember my grandparents had this big console record player stereo thing. It had these big speakers in it. It had an 8-track player and an 8-track recorder on it, where you could put your vinyl on, and you could put a blank. Because I remember I found some blank 8-tracks at a flea market one time, and I did this. And you could put your record on, put the blank 8-track in there, and you could record the tracks from your vinyl onto your 8-track. And I used that thing later when I first started playing bass. I used that thing as an amplifier at my grandparents' house because it had a microphone input on it, which is just crazy. Where I guess they just thought people were going to, this is before karaoke machines. So I guess they just wanted people to be able to sing along, but you could actually put a blank 8-track in there and push record, and you could plug, if you had an adapter that went from 1/4 inch to the little small plug, headphones plug, you could plug a guitar or a bass right into that thing and play along with the music you were listening to. And another one of the first early Rush records that I got at a flea market, I remember I got it at the flea market for $2 on vinyl, was Grace Under Pressure. And it's still one of my favorite records. I listened to it the other day, and it's one of the ones that's another one of those front-to-back great records to me. Maybe only one song on there I really wasn't a fan of. Kid Gloves, I think it was. I mean, it's all right. It's not bad. But still a great record. So that's number 3. Number 4, of course, 2112. And, for the longest time, I was only a fan of side 1 of 2112. When I was younger, besides maybe A Passage to Bangkok, the weed smoking song, I really didn't get into much on side 2, but that definitely changed. I got older. Number 5, Signals. Again, I'm going to go fast with the top 10 because we're going to go in detail on all these records again. I don't want to go too much into them, all the individual songs quite yet. Number 5 is Signals. That was the album, another transitional record for them. That was the album after Moving Pictures, so that was sort of the another big change in record for them. New World Man. A lot of people don't know that song had New World Man on it. What a lot of people don't realize is that even though Moving Pictures was their biggest selling record and had their biggest, most well-known song ever on it, Tom Sawyer, 99%, maybe even 100%. I mean, most Rush fans, most people that consider themselves hardcore Rush fans, don't realize that Tom Sawyer was actually not their highest charting single. Certainly, the classic rock radio stations these days don't realize that either. Tom Sawyer, even though it was their most popular song, it still remains their most well-known and most identifiable, most popular song, the song most identifiable with Rush off their most commercially successful record. It was actually the song New World Man off of Signals that was their highest charting single. It actually went farther up the charts than Tom Sawyer did, but is not nearly as well known, not nearly as played. Every once in a while, you'll hear it. If you hear classic rock, like they'll do like a, rock block or whatever. They'll play 3 or 4 songs in a row by one band. Every once in a while, if you hear that, they'll throw it into the rock block. And some people are like, well, why would they choose this song to throw it in, if they're playing a rock block or 3 or 4 songs? That's why, because it was actually their highest charting single in the history of the band, New World Man, off of Signals. Number 6, Hemispheres. That's a 3 in the trilogy of the records of 2112, Farewell to Kings. And Hemispheres. Interesting note about that record. This is fascinating. I didn't know this for many years. Queen's A Night at the Opera, Oasis, What's the Story, Morning Glory, and Rush Hemispheres were all three. If you think about those three records and you're like, they couldn't be more radically different from each other. Three of my favorite records of all time for sure, all recorded at the same studio. And it's interesting because Hemispheres, they really had a lot of trouble. If you listen to some of the recordings from that time, you'll notice that the pitch, everybody knows Geddy had a high voice, but if you notice when you listen to any of the live recordings from the Hemispheres era, they seem to be a key down. There was actually a mistake. The engineer and the producer on Hemispheres, see, tape machines were different. There was you had to calibrate them. There was different things you had to do to them, very different from just recording straight to digital like people do now. And there was a discrepancy in the tape machine when they calibrated the tape machine, when they recorded Hemispheres, that nobody discovered until way later. So because of that, the Hemispheres record to this day, even the ones you get now, it hasn't been corrected because, you can't really fix it at that point. There are some corrected versions on YouTube. There are, if you go look, there are some fan versions of Hemispheres on YouTube where people have corrected it, but the whole record ended up being like a semitone higher in pitch. So when they started rehearsing for the tour and they were like, what is going on? Geddy couldn't get his voice up to match what it was on the record. And they later realized after the fact that there was a problem in the calibration of the tape machine. And so the whole record is like a semitone higher in pitch than it should have been. So it's interesting to go back and listen to those corrected versions of that. Number 7 on my top 10 favorite Rush records is A Farewell to Kings. The follow-up to, of course, 2112 with tracks like Closer to the Heart, Xanadu, Cygnus. I mean, what can you say? Great record. Number 8, Fly By Night. Fly By Night, the first record to feature Neil Peart on drums, and the first record to feature Neil Peart's lyrics. And, when you go back and listen to that first self-titled Rush record, the one with John Rutsey on drums, very much a straight ahead, sort of Zeppelin, Blue Cheer, The Who type of straightforward rock record. But when they came out with Fly By Night, being the second record, the record label they kind of didn't know what to do with them, because it wasn't anything like the first record. I mean, they came straight out with Anthem on that record, straight out with the Ayn Rand stuff. And By Tor and the Snow Dog and the song Fly By Night. That's a very divisive record with Rush fans. A lot of people don't like Fly By Night. I like Fly By Night. I like that record. It's important in the history, and it's one that I enjoy listening to, especially the final track on the album, In the End. I think that's one of the most... It's really, I think it was a sign of things to come, with the bombast and the epicness of Rush. Number 9 is a two-way tie for me. Number 9 is a two-way tie because these records came out pretty much right on top of each other. They're very similar in the sound of them, recording-wise, and the tours. If you go back and watch some of the concert videos, they didn't change their tour. Usually Rush changed their stage setup and stuff. They didn't change so much between Presto and Roll the Bones, which came out virtually right on top of each other, within a year of each other. And so they really didn't change their stage setup or the stage show or anything. Those records still kind of sound the same. It was hard for me to pick one or the other. Like I've said before, listen, every band's got stinkers, okay? Every band. Your favorite band, my favorite band, every band, doesn't matter who it is. The greatest bands on the planet, every single band and artist has got stinkers somewhere in their collection. It's not, but, and Presto had a few stinkers. Roll the Bones had a few stinkers. But there are also some fucking phenomenal songs on those records. The song Presto, that's the one for me that I've been listening to a lot recently since Neil passed, is the song Presto. Gosh, that song got me through some tough times. Show Don't Tell, The Pass. Presto, I heard for many years. I remember hearing in the early days, in the early 90s of being a Rush fan, I remember everybody saying that Presto was the worst record Rush ever made. And that was the one I'd found for like $1 in the cutout bin at Walmart. And I don't think it was the worst record they ever made. Now, what would be the worst record they ever made? Ooh, that's tough. That's really subjective. That might be even tougher than saying what your favorite song, your favorite record is. What's the worst record? Yeah, that's subjective. That's going to really differ. Again, a lot of people say Presto. I disagree. Presto had some fantastic songs on it. Yeah, it had a few clunkers on it too. A lot of people might say Hold Your Fire. I disagree with that. I love Hold Your Fire. Hold Your Fire's got some fantastic songs on it. Time Stands Still, Force 10. It had a few clunkers on it. Second Nature, not really my favorite song. Tai Shan, not really my favorite song, but I've grown to like it more as I've gotten older. Gosh, it's again, Caress of Steel maybe, but again, Caress of Steel had Lakeside Park. Caress of Steel had Bastille Day. That's tough. Even that's the thing, even what you might say, even if you had to narrow down and say one is your least favorite, to say which one is the worst record, that's hard to say that they had a worse record, because even what you might consider, let's say I considered Caress of Steel the worst Rush record. It still had some redeeming stuff on it. Let's say you think Tesreco is the worst Rush record. Still had some good songs on it. You might think, Paper Trails is the worst Rush record, but it still had some fucking killers on it. So that's really the mark of a great band right there, I think, is that even what you might consider to be, your least favorite albums or something, even those still had some killer songs on and songs that translated much better when you saw them in the context of a live performance. So yeah, tied for number 9 for me would be Presto and Roll the Bones. Roll the Bones, it got some killer songs on it. I mean, it had, we'll get to it when we go through the breakdown. It had a lot of great songs, a few stinkers. Number 10 for me, I think is my favorite record from the modern day Rush records, meaning all the records made from the 90s to the last record, which came out in 2012, Clockwork Angels. I say number 10 of my top 10 favorite records from Rush has to be Snakes and Arrows. Absolutely. I think that that's one, again, under the category of all these top 10 records where it's hard. There's really not a bad song on it. I think it's the best record they made during that period. Definitely the best album they made during the period after they came back from the hiatus after the passing of Neil's family. Definitely. But, of course, if you look at it, there was really only, 4 records during that time? Vapor Trails, Feedback, which was a covers album they did for the 30th anniversary tour, Snakes and Arrows, and then Clockwork Angels. Yeah. So, yeah, definitely of the post-90s records, I would say by far, Snakes and Arrows is a fantastic record, front to back. It's got the heavy, it's got just about everything. It doesn't have any long thematic songs on it, really. But just every song on there is great. It really is. If you've never heard Snakes and Arrows, it's definitely one to check out. All right, moving on now. Let's move into favorite tour. Favorite Rush tour. Now, I'm only going to go through the tours that I personally saw, okay? And give you my list front to back of the ones I saw. I'm not going to rate favorite tours of ones that I didn't get to see. You know, maybe if I would have been alive or old enough to see the Hemispheres tour in 77, I was 1 year old, maybe I would have thought that tour was better than the ones that I'm naming. So I'm just going to go through and give you my list of my favorite tours in order from the ones that I saw. And as I talked about yesterday, number one on that list for me definitely was Counterparts, because that was the first tour where, you know, even though it wasn't the first tour I saw, the first tour I saw of them was the Roll the Bones tour. It was the first tour where I was familiar with all their material. And I'd be in that short couple year period between seeing them for the first time, I had gotten more of their records and really became, I was a fan, but I wasn't a true fan yet the first time I saw Rush. So the Counterparts tour was the one for me, like I said, life-changing. Life-changing. I was never the same. Never the same after that tour. God, that was an unbelievable show. It had everything, and you just realize that this is not something you're getting from every other band. Second for me was the very next tour after Counterparts. And again, that, you know, during that the time period in the 90s, you know, being that it's crazy being, you know, that going from being just in my early teenage years at the start of the decade, and then ending with being in my, you know, mid early 20s at the end of the decade. Again, you're talking about a time period where you're growing and changing, and you're experiencing a lot of new things in life. Test for Echo was number two for me for the tours that I saw, because it was the first, and I think it was a very special tour because, well, for a lot of reasons. Number one, it was the first tour that I saw of them where they did two legs, meaning they came and played in my town twice. They played the first leg in December 2006 at Reunion Arena. I was there for that. And it was also 96 was also the 20th anniversary of the 2112 record. And so for the first time in their history, Rush played the entire 2112 A-side on that tour, and it was incredible. And then they came back. That was in December 96, and they came back in May of 97, and they didn't play at Reunion Arena this time. The next time they came back, they played at the Coca-Cola Starplex, which is like the outdoor, you know, everybody has one in their city, the outdoor shed amphitheater that has the lawn area and all that. But the thing was, when they came back for that second leg, because, you know, listen, they were on tour, so, well, when the first leg, again, was at Reunion Arena, indoor arena, right? So when they came back and played the Shed, which is an outdoor arena, in May of 97, they didn't switch out their gear. So even though they were playing in an outdoor arena, they still had an outdoor, you know, amphitheater. They still had the arena gear. Oh my Lord. That was the loudest. That was the loudest tour I ever saw Rush on. My ears were ringing for days after that. They were so loud, but clear, crystal clear. It was so good. And Neil's drums were thunderous on that. That was the first tour. That was what began what they continued on through their tour. Counterparts was the last tour in which they had an opening band. Rush was very famous for bringing out a variety of eclectic opening bands throughout the years. Hell, on the Signals tour, for some dates, they had the Fabulous Thunderbirds. A lot of people forget that they had the fucking Fabulous blues band opening for them on dates on the Signals tour. A lot of people either don't know or don't remember that. They had very eclectic opening bands throughout the years. Pat Travers. I mean, they had a lot of different opening acts throughout the years, but that was the first tour. Test for Echo was the first tour where it was in the evening with Rush, where they played one set, took like a 20-minute break, came back and played another set. They ended up getting like a 3-hour show or something out. It was fantastic. And that was a trend that would stay and remain in the Rush live show until the very end. Number 3 favorite tour that I saw, Snakes and Arrows. Again, for the same reason of Test for Echo, that was another tour where they did 2 legs. To my knowledge, that was the only time. There may have been some of the early tours that were before my time that I missed. I don't know for sure, so I can't speak to that. There may have been some of the earlier tours that were before my time that they played 2 legs on. But to my knowledge, Test for Echo and Snakes and Arrows were the only 2 tours where they did 2 legs. I mean, they come back once and they came back again. And I saw both legs. Both legs of Test for Echo, both legs for Snakes and Arrows. And I remember on the second leg, being out in the parking lot, got there early and remember being out in the parking lot. And it was the only time, because again, it was the outdoor shed venue again. And I guess I just happened to get there early enough or whatever, but it was the first time I ever got to hear Rush do a sound check. First and only time. And I remember I was fucking coming unglued. I was coming because they did the song "Ghost of a Chance" off of "Roll the Bones," which they had never performed live before. I think, and if I'm not mistaken, I think it's one of only 2 songs ever in the entire history of Rush that has the word "love" in it. I think the other one was it "Distant Early Warning" or one of those. One of those songs off Grace Under Pressure, I think, had the word "love" in it once. And that's another thing, another one of the many great things about Rush. No love songs. A lot of people don't realize that till you point out and they go, wow, holy shit, they didn't have any love songs, didn't know. In fact, that song, "Ghost of a Chance," is probably the closest to a love song they might have. But they never had ballads. They never had love songs. I mean, as far as ballads go, maybe "Closer to the Heart" might be the closest to a ballad, and even that's not really a ballad because it's not, you listen to what it's about. It's not really about love or anything. But I think I just think that's, listen, those songs about love and those songs about, hey, that's all great. But let's leave that to Journey and, whoever, all the other bands. I just like the fact that let's be honest, I don't know. I don't want to talk shit. I never had any problems. I gotta be honest with you. I never had any problems with ladies. Being a Rush fan, getting ladies, I gotta be honest with you. I never had a problem with it. But I'm not trying to talk shit or anything, but let's be honest, there's probably good high percentage of Rush fans that weren't getting no ass. And I think it was a genius insight on their part to know, hey, look, these are our audience. They're not going to be able to really relate to that. I don't know if that was the reason why, but my point is that most bands leaned on that and relied on that, especially in terms of getting radio play and singles and all that stuff. And Rush never cared about any of that. They only cared about doing it their way 100% of the time. And that's what the 2112 album gave them, because, the record labels threatened to drop them after Caress of Steel. And they wanted singles and love songs, and the management told them, well, yeah, that's what we're going to do. And then they said, no, fuck them. They're going to drop us anyway. Fuck it. Let's just go make the record we want to make, and we'll go out guns blazing. Fuck them. And they made 2112, and they delivered to the record label, and the record label said, are you fucking mad? Are you out of your minds? You're finished. You're done. Pack your shit, boys. We told you we wanted fucking singles and ballads, and you gave us a fucking record with a 22-minute epic piece on it? Are you fucking crazy? And it blew up. It blew up. And because of that, Rush never had to worry about record labels telling them how they were going to make their music ever again. And I got to tell you, that's one of those things, man, where it's, again, such a big inspiration to me. Blaze your own trail, do your own thing. Don't worry about what anybody else tells you to do. But if you're going to make that, going to make that kind of gamble, you better be good. And they were. So Snakes and Arrows for me was my third favorite tour, because not only because I saw that tour twice, but also, well, I'll get more into that here in a bit. Roll the Bones would have been, that was my fourth favorite one. It was the first time I saw Rush, so that's definitely got to be there. R30 tour, 30th anniversary tour. That was the first tour I got to take my brother and sister to, and it was fantastic. And I was higher than Giraffe Pussy at that concert. God damn, I was stoned. Holy shit. I was baked out of my fucking brains at that concert, man. Because oh, fuck. I'm okay to admit this now. I don't think I want to admit this. I actually, there was some shit going on or something that I can't remember what it was. And she didn't have time to get high before I left or anything. So I remember I had some weed in a bag. I'd never done this before. I had some weed. I took a big old fucking bud of this weed. And I had some Gatorade, and I took this bud, and I just, because I knew, like, if I got high, by the time I got to the venue, by the time the show started and all that, I wasn't going to be high anymore. So I took this big ass fucking bud, and I chewed it up. And I swallowed it and drank it down. It was gritty as hell. I could hardly choke it down. I was picking fucking weed out of my teeth on the way to the concert. But man, by the time we got to our seats and the show started, oh my God, I was fucked up. Oh, I was so fucked. That was the most fucked up I'd probably ever had been at a Rush show. God damn, I was fucked up. But it was a fantastic tour. And notable because they brought out for the first time, I think since the 70s, they brought out the double necks for Xanadu. Alex had the white double neck Gibson, and Getty had the double neck Rickenbacker. Oh, yeah, it was fantastic. Time Machine Tour 2010. The only thing that was disappointing about the Time Machine Tour, I had some great seats for the Time Machine Tour. Some of the best seats I ever had for a Rush concert, but it was so disappointing, not in their performance or what they played or anything. It was fantastic because it wasn't an album tour. It was just a greatest hits tour. And it was the 30th anniversary of Moving Pictures, so they performed Moving Pictures in its entirety, including the song they swore they would never play live. And they did, and it was, man, if I had to narrow down a single moment, it's difficult. It's very difficult. If I had to nail down a single moment at any Rush concert I ever went to as my favorite, it probably is the moment on the Time Machine Tour when they played the song The Camera Eye from Moving Pictures. I was mesmerized. And I looked around and I saw the entire crowd was mesmerized because everybody knew that we probably were never ever going to hear this. And I watch it you can get the Time Machine DVD and it's on there and it's fantastic. But man, there was it was just a moment. But that was a disappointing tour because, man, Rush they always had the best sound. The best. Uncanny. Even if you were in the top upper nosebleeds of an arena, you could still hear it, and it sounded as crystal clear as if you were wearing headphones. And I don't know what the problem was on that Time Machine tour at the show that I saw in Dallas, but the sound was absolutely horrendous for the majority of the show. Horrendous. It was terrible. It was muddy. It was distorted. There was no definition or separation in the instruments. Neil's kit, every time he would go and do a run on the toms, a fill run on the toms, you couldn't hear any of the individual toms. It would just blur together in a big muddy mess. It was bad. It was the worst sound for a Rush show that I ever saw, and it really marred what otherwise would have been a fantastic show and a fantastic performance. And then lastly, Clockwork Angels, which, as I talked about on part one of this two-part series, was the last time that I got to see Rush perform in 2012 when they performed with a string section. And, I like I said yesterday, that being the last time that I saw them, the fact that it was them recording a live album and live DVD, Blu-ray concert in Dallas, and I got to attend it, all those great things. When I watched back the Blu-ray the other day, and I remember it being this way at the concert, it was as far as shows that I saw, and I don't know if it was this way on the whole tour, but as far as shows that I saw, it was the worst for as far as Geddy Lee vocally on that tour. His vocals were just not good on that tour at all. You could tell he was struggling. Everything sounded like it was strained. And subsequently, I heard after that that wasn't lost on him. And if you watch the R40 home video, the DVD Blu-ray, which was the 40th anniversary tour, which ended up being the final Rush tour, if you watch that video, you'll notice, especially after you watch the Time Machine one, not Time Machine one, the Clockwork Angels one, the Dallas one, on the R40 one from 2015, his voice is phenomenal on that. Holy shit. You couldn't even believe it. Like, wow. And I heard an interview with him. Yeah, it wasn't lost on him. Apparently, this is crazy. This is really crazy because you wouldn't think there's factors that can affect your voice, your singing voice, that you wouldn't even know would affect it. Apparently, after the Clockwork Angels tour, Geddy, obviously, he was the one doing the singing, so obviously he knew he was struggling vocally. He actually went to some specialists and some doctors and worked with some doctors. And this is so crazy. Come to find out, it was dairy. Isn't that crazy? It was dairy. Dairy, I don't know whether it was lactose intolerance or something of that nature, but dairy was affecting his singing voice. And I think even he was shocked when they told him this. Like, dairy, like what? And he cut out dairy from his diet. He got some new, had some voice training and got some different, like throat treatments and stuff, stuff you could drink, hot teas, honey and stuff like that. And boy, did it ever turn him around. That was what was so disappointing about, to me, another one of the disappointing, it's all disappointing and sad at this point. The fact that we're never going to see Rush again and we're never going to get any more Rush records is disappointing, but That was, I mean, God, he sounds so good on that R40 thing. Man, I mean, better than he sounded since the Tesla Echo tour. And I think the Tesla Echo tour was for me, I think, the peak, I think, for how Geddes. He sounded incredible on the Tesla Echo tour, especially on 2112, where for many years he had kind of changed, where he, on 2112, the way he'd sing from the album, we've taken care of everything from the words you ring, the songs you sing, the pictures that give pleasure to your eyes. And he changed that later. He was singing it kind of like in a different way. And he was singing it like, we've taken care of everything. The words you ring, the songs you sing, the pictures that give pleasure to your eyes. He was singing it like a different way. And then he came out on the Tesla Echo tour, and it was like he was hitting all the phrasing just like he did. Oh, it was so good. But what a lot of people don't realize, too, is that the reason why Geddes' voice changed so much through the years, number one, Robert Plant syndrome. That's what we call that in the industry. Nut drop syndrome. Your voice gets lower through time. I mean, mine has. You go back and listen to the early radio shows I used to do. Hey, everybody, what's going on? I sound like I'm on helium. Hey, everybody, welcome to the Global Reality. How you doing out there? I didn't know how to talk on a microphone. I didn't, when I started my first show in 2007, I didn't know what I was doing. But as far as music and singing goes, and I experienced this as a singer too, because I have a high singing voice as well, and all my heroes had high singing voices. But if you're not a musician, you probably don't know this. PA systems and live sound systems were shit. Were dog shit until really the 90s. They were dog shit for a long time. And so, when you were a lot of these rock bands like Rush and Led Zeppelin and Queen, and you wanted a singer, Black Sabbath, you wanted a singer that could project his voice up over a fucking 100-watt Marshall, the Who, the same thing. The guitar and bass amplifiers were much louder than the wattage of the PA systems of the time. And in fact, most of the old PA systems were constructed of multiple PA systems daisy-chained together. But monitors were shit back then. Sound systems were just shit. So Geddes' transformation really, vocal-wise, happened as a result of not only getting older and his voice transforming, but also the evolution in the of equipment and gear and all that. Let's see what else. So that's the end of my favorite tours. Here's one I've been asked a couple of times. This is a good one. Favorite drum kit that Neil used through the years. Man, he used a lot of great ones, and he was with a lot of different drum companies. I know in the early days he was using Slingerland drums. He was using Ludwig's for a while. Into the 80s, he was using Tamas. He had one Tama kit that he used for a long time. He just kept repainting and refinishing every year. And then from, I think, about the early 90s on, he was exclusively using DW, Drum Workshop, DW drums. So, going back again, I think favorite kit going back into the Tesla Echo tour. Actually, I just put up on my other YouTube channel, I put up a Tesla Echo concert video footage, and you can hear in that concert video footage I remastered the audio and video of and put up. It's fantastic. You can hear not only what I was telling you before about how loud that concert was. You can tell even in the video how loud it was. Alex had so many Marshalls on that tour. But you can also hear that kit. So, yeah, favorite kit would have to be the Red Sparkle. It was a Red Sparkle DW drum workshop kit that he used on the Test Reco tour. That would probably be my number one favorite drum kit of all. It was just sounded huge. Huge. I mean, like Bonham-esque huge. The toms just boom, boom. I mean, thunderous toms. You know, the interesting thing about Neil, too, is that unlike most drummers who, you know, have stage technicians, drum technicians and stuff, Neil always had a drum tech, and he always had a guy that would, you know, set up his drums and stuff for him. Most guys in that position, you know, where they're touring with big acts like that, stadium and arena acts and stuff, you know, they have technicians that set up all their shit, and they don't have to do anything except come out and grab their instrument and play, and that's it. And, you know, they don't have to worry about anything else except performing, and that's how it should be. Neil, however, is one of the few drummers, maybe the only drummer, certainly the only drummer I've ever heard of. I'm not going to sit here and say he's the only drummer that does this, but he's the only drummer that I've ever heard of that actually hand-tuned his own drums every night before every single show. That just doesn't happen in the music industry, I have to tell you. It just doesn't. Yes, he had his techs and his guys set up the kit, and they would set it up, get everything going, and then when everything was done, Neil would come out and he would hand tune, and you could tell, because his toms, especially, I've never heard anybody else have a tom sound like Neil. It was a fucking secret. I don't know. Maybe that info's out there. Maybe we can get that. He probably took those secrets to the grave with him. He had this trick for making those toms. And not only that, they were tuned to notes. And if you listen to the that was another question I get too. What favorite drum solo? Gotta say Test for Echo Tour. I think that was my favorite drum solo too. And his drum solos were an evolution. You know, a lot of them had similar parts to other ones from other tours, but they were an evolution. But what I didn't know for many years, and maybe some people know this, maybe some people don't. You know, if you're not a drummer, maybe you don't know this, but Neil's drum solos, he never really, he later talked about this in later years, but he was doing it for much longer than he was talking about it and admitting to it. But his drum solos through the years were the history of drumming. Starting out with African rhythms, tribal drumming, and going all the way through the history of drums into the modern day, into swing drumming, into big band, into early rock and roll, into the 60s. He even had a part where he would do like the Phil Spector, Ronettes, Be My Baby, doom, 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 cha, doom, 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 cha, cha, cha. He would do that in there. He would go through. His drum solos were not just random hitting of drums like most drums, every other drum solo on earth is. His drum solos were crafted, orchestrated pieces that evolved from tour to tour. And they represented the history of drumming from the earliest all into the modern day. Just sheer genius. Sheer genius. But, yeah, that was really, that was the thing about his drums. Like I said yesterday, it wasn't even necessarily, yes, I'm not going to take anything away from Neil and not say that he was not the greatest drummer of all time, but it was kind of like a magic trick. And he wanted you to know that, at least like I talked about in that drum video, Taking Center Stage. It was kind of a magic trick. If you had as much money and resources he did, if I was able to have a drum kit that had 40 pieces on it, and I could tune those drums the way he tuned them, yeah, I could sound like Neil too. But sounding like Neil and having a drum kit like his and being able to play the things that he played is not the secret. Anybody can play what somebody else has already played. The secret is is coming up with something that original that never existed before on your own. Good luck with that. That, my friends, is the magic and the secret of Neil Elwood Peart. Second favorite drum kit ever. Again, two-way tie. Like I said, the red sparkle DWs on the Tessera Echo, definitely my favorite. But my second favorite was the black sparkle DWs he had on the R30 30th anniversary tour. I loved that kit. Oh, I loved that kit because I just liked the look of it, the coloration, the sparkle, and it had symbols on it from all the albums. It had like the skeleton from Roll the Bones. It had stuff from Hemisphere, stuff from 2112. It had symbols and little things on it representatory of all but the Clockwork Angel set was amazing too. The steampunk set he had with the gears. Yeah, he had some phenomenal sets through the years for sure. Favorite live album? Oh, here we go. This is tough. As a lot of people may not know, especially during the 70s and stuff, a lot of those so-called live albums from the 70s, a lot of those so-called live albums of the 70s weren't all necessarily live. A lot of them were partially live, and then they would take the rest of the stuff, they would record it live, and they would go in and overdub guitars, vocals, stuff like that. The only thing they couldn't redo was the drums. So, for instance, like Kiss Alive. The only thing alive and live on Kiss Alive is the drums and the audience noise. And even then, the audience noise was like quadruple tracked from multiple shows to make it seem louder. Frampton Comes Alive, that was another one. Not everything on Frampton Comes Alive was recorded 100% in live audience. Judas Priest, Unleashed in the East. They had a problem with that with that album where the vocal track got destroyed. So the performances of the music performance from Judas Priest Unleashed in the East are all recorded live, but the vocals were re-recorded by Rob Halford in the studio. But I'm happy to report two of my favorite bands, both Queen and Rush, all of their live albums, 100% live front to back. Now, I'll give you a little asterisk on that in a minute. But as far as like all the early Rush records, the live records, All the World's a Stage, their first live album, Exit Stage Left, A Show of Hands, on and on. The only one I know for a fact that they did some fixing on, because I know this because I was there, was the Clockwork Angels live concert video and the album. Because, again, I was there. Subdivisions was the first song they played. Towards the very beginning of the Subdivision song on that recording, Alex's guitar went completely out. And if you watch the video, there's a little clip where you can see him, because I was watching it. I had floor seats for that show, so I was watching it live. He was flipping the fuck out. He was screaming. Alex is a cool guy. He's a funny guy. He's not a guy that you necessarily, relate to having. Man, he was flipping the fuck out because his guitar just went dead. It just went out, completely out during Subdivisions. And then it came back in. But when you watch the concert video or you listen to the record, it's seamless. The guitar's there the entire time. But you watch the video, you can still see Alex on camera having his freak out. And you're like, if you didn't know anything, you're watching like, who's he yelling at? Because you see him yelling over to the side of the stage, but you never hear the guitar drop out. So they definitely fixed that in post-production. But other than that, their albums were completely live. As far as my favorite ones, oh, that's tough. I like them all. In fact, I always kind of tell people to start with the live albums, really. If you're new to Rush and you're just getting into them, I would start with the live albums first. Then go back and get the studio albums later. So for me, two-way tie. For live album, I have to say Exit Stage Left. Two-way tie with Different Stages. That was one I mentioned yesterday. Different Stages was put out about a year or so after the end of the Test for Echo tour, and it has recordings from that entire era of the 90s tours when I first saw them. So it has recordings from Roll the Bones, Counterparts, and Test for Echo tours, as well as a bonus third disc from the Hammersmith Odeon in 77. So if you get Exit Stage Left and you get Different Stages, you get a good representation of 3 decades of Rush's music with pretty much all their best songs on it. So if you're new to Rush or you haven't got any of their live albums, I would get Exit Stage Left and Different Stages right out of the gates, because that's 4 discs worth of music and it has all the best stuff on it. Favorite live concert video? Again, that's a tough one. I watched through all of them. It's kind of part of my, my own personal grieving process over the weekend, my own personal, therapy. And a show of hands, I put up a remastered version of that I made from the Laserdisc version, which actually has a song that wasn't on the DVD or VHS version on my other YouTube channel. It has the song Lock and Key on it. That was the one I had for many years, like I was talking about yesterday. I played through the bass amp and all that. So, again, another two-way tie, I think, between that one and Snakes and Arrows Live, which is a 2-disc set. And the reason I would say that one with Snakes and Arrows, because the Snakes and Arrows has, for me, seeing Rush live at, so many times, seeing them 9 times, I was only interested after a while. They were always great live, no matter what, but I was always interested in hearing. I always just wanted to hear the songs I had never heard live before. And the Snakes and Arrows Live 2-disc, no, it's a 3-disc set, actually, has a great representation of a lot of songs that they never played live a lot. So, a show of hands, the Snakes and Arrows Live 2-way tie for me for favorite live concert video. Favorite bootleg live video, and this is one I mentioned earlier, the Test for Echo 97 from Ontario, Canada. That's one I just put up on my other YouTube channel. 2112 Live in its entirety for that. Some of the songs like Half the World, Virtuosity, Test for Echo, those songs that I mentioned that were all on the Test for Echo record that, weren't that great really on record, really came across strong live. And it's a great representation of that tour. And also, subsequently, that video was filmed just a month. Almost exactly 1 month to the day before the loss of Neil's daughter in the tragic car accident. So, and that was the first tour after he'd been with Freddie Gruber, the famous drum legend. And God, he was just playing with a fierceness and a ferocity and hitting the shit out of those drums. And that all comes across in that Ontario 97 Test for Echo bootleg. So, all right. That's the end of all the best of. Coming up next, we're going to jump right into going album by album from the first record all the way to the end, starting out with the first record, the self-titled Rush record from 1974. And we're starting out with track number 1 from the self-titled Rush album, Finding My Way. That's just a hell of a way to kick off an album in a career. I love the way it kind of slow, the guitar kind of comes in quiet. That's a tricky one. That's one that I think I've never heard them say this, but I had to think that they did that on purpose. It's one that always gets me even to this day, because you hear the guitar and the guitar comes in. So what it makes you do when you first put it on is you hear the guitar, and it's kind of quiet and it builds like a crescendo. And then So you're kind of going for the volume knob, right? Because it sounds low. So you think, okay, it's low. I need to turn it up. So you turn it up, and then it builds and it gets louder. And then when it comes in, you know, with it, yeah, oh yeah, it's bam, it hits loud and it's super loud. Then you have to end up, you know, turning it down some. But I love that record. That record, even though it didn't have Neil on it, it's just a special record to me. It sounds, I don't know, it has such a youthful, innocent sound to it, you know, and yeah, you could say it sounds derivative of the bands of the time of Led Zeppelin and stuff like that, but that's, you know, that's with a lot of bands with their first record. It's Finding My Way, Need Some Love. Gosh, all these songs are great. Take a Friend, Here Again, What You're Doing. Well, you know what you're doing. All that you've been doing wrong. That gets very Zeppelin-esque. In the Mood, of course, which is they were closing shows within the Mood, even I think all the way through into the 90s. I think all the way to the Presto tour, they were closing the show within the Mood. Before and After, that's another great one. Which one is the one that's my favorite? Is it Before and After, or is it Here Again? I can't remember. It might be Here Again. Man, there's one. All the memories keep repeating. I think it's Here Again. It's it really is a great record. You know, again, being that it was their first record and independent release, there's a recording out there called, you can get it on Amazon. I think it's called, it's not like one of their official releases, but man, it sounds good. I think it's called Rush ABC. I think you might be able to find it on Amazon by typing Rush ABC or Live ABC or something like that. But it's like in studio, I guess in like television or radio studio recordings, kind of like the BBC, Live at the BBC recording series that a lot of bands have put out. It's not studio recordings, but it's recorded in a studio-like environment, I guess, live for radio broadcast or whatever. And it actually has Neil on the drums playing those songs from the first record. So that's one a lot of Rush fans, a lot of people I don't think have heard. So Rush ABC, I think is what it's called, something like that. You can look up and find it. It's a good one. It's one we're checking out, especially if you're a fan of the early first Rush album and you want to hear those songs played, you know, with Neil playing them. That's a good one to listen to. So moving right along to, Rush ABC Live from Cleveland's Agora Ballroom, I guess is what it's called. It doesn't sound live to me. I think some of the stuff in there is in the studio. Either way. And then we get to the next record in 1975, the second Rush album, Fly By Night. The first album featuring Neil on drums and lyrics, and it starts right out of the gates with Anthem. Love that song. That's another one of those ones. I mean, right out of the gates, Neil was coming in with the, he didn't wait. He was coming right out of the gates with sort of the libertarian, Ayn Rand inspired stuff, because she had a book called Anthem. They named their record label or their management company Anthem. Know your place in life is where you want to be. Don't ever let them tell you that you owe it all to me. Keep on looking forward, no use in looking round. Hold your head above the ground, don't let them bring you down. I love that song. Anthem of the heart and anthem of the mind. Oh, that's such a great song. I love the verse, the one in the song that says, well, I know they've always told you selfishness was wrong. Yet it was for me, not you. I came to write this song. So great. Anthem of the heart and anthem of the mind. A funeral dirge for eyes gone blind. I mean, it's just, when you listen to those lyrics, and then you go back and you listen to the lyrics they were doing on the first record, you're like, whoa, holy shit. They hit, man, Alex and Geddy, listen, those guys, I'm not to take anything away from those guys as musicians or anything else. You know, I have no doubt that even had they not found Neil, they would have had a career and it would have been fine. But man, did they ever hit the absolute lottery? God damn, son. Did those two guys hit the absolute lottery? A fucking one in a zillion. Man, did they ever hit the absolute lottery getting Neil in there. And, you know, those guys, it still blows me away. Those guys have been friends, you know, those guys have been friends since 7th grade. 13 years old, they've been friends. But, man, again, you know, I'm sure they would have had a great career, but nothing. It would have not been, Rush as you know it today would not exist without Neil. That's just the bottom line truth of the matter. That's a fact. Because he elevated them both in terms of music, because his ability to be able to write those lyrics and also to play the drums the way that he did is what also caused them, by hook and crook, to have to evolve into the musicians they became, because they evolved together. It's just one of the many fascinating things. You know, I've being a documentary filmmaker, and I've been making films now. This is, it'll be 13 years. And, you know, my favorite filmmaker of all time is Stanley Kubrick. And, you know, he first 10 years of his career, he was making documentaries. I'm not going to lie to you. It is a dream of mine. I do want to one day make real, actual films, you know, like cinema films. And, you know, listen, if there's one thing that I learned from Rush, it's, you know, you got to dream big. And, you know, I'm not afraid to tell you that's my dream. My dream is to, not just that they will one day make a Rush biopic, but that one day I'll be the person that makes it. That's my dream. Hey, it may never happen, but you got to have them. Life's not worth living if you don't have dreams. So Fly By Night starts out with Anthem, Best I Can. That was one that, Best I Can was actually one that was around before Neil got in the band. That was one they were actually playing back when John Rutsey was still in the band. Beneath, Between, and Behind. Oh man, that one, that's definitely, you know, that, God, the lyrics in that. Beneath the noble birth, between the proudest words, behind the beauty cracks appear. Once with hands held high, they sing out to the sky. But shadows bow in fear. I mean, it just, I can imagine being Geddy at that point and trying to figure out, what in the fuck am I supposed to do with this? That's not how you sing rock and roll. You know, if you think about what they were doing and what they were, you know, Working Man and all that stuff. And then here comes Neil in the band, and he's, you know, handing, you know, these 10 score years ago, defeat the king before a wondrous dream came into being. I mean, you're just like, what? It's like novellas. I can imagine being Geddy in 1975 when they were doing Fly By Night. I can't imagine being Geddy and going, how in the fuck am I supposed to shoehorn these fucking wordy shit into rock music? But he did it, and thank God he did it. But it's when you look at it and you look at these lyric sheets and you read this and you're just like, I mean, nobody was doing that in rock music at the time. It was never been done before or since. But Beneath, Between, and Behind, I think, is the first one where, you know, it was kind of like, this is the sign of what's to come for the future of Rush. By Tor and the Snow Dog, next on the album, that was the first of the thematic songs. You know, the multi-part long songs that would become their trademark. Fly By Night. I love the song Fly By Night. I love that because it's a great pop song. Great guitar part, great lyrics. I love the middle part, the kind of middle breakdown part. And Geddy's kind of got that kind of chorusy, kind of echoey effect on his voice. Quietly dancing, my thoughts apprehensive. The hours slipped away. Leaving my homeland and staying in a new land. My life begins today. And then it goes back into the fly by night away from hell. Making Memories, that was one that they wrote. That's a road song. It's very much a road song. Album had a couple of road songs on it. That was when they were kind of first starting to get to know each other, you know, with getting Alex and Neil, and apparently they were on the road in America and they got lost somewhere in Indiana, and that's when they wrote the song "Making Memories," which is you know, not the best song they've ever did, but very much of the time and very much of that era for Rush. You know, not really anything they would go back to. Rivendell, which of course is the first of an exploration. You know, Led Zeppelin was doing that too around the time. It seemed to be a theme in the early 70s of you know, the J.R.R. Tolkien stuff. And Rivendell, of course, was from Lord of the Rings and all that, which they explored later more in Caress of Steel. And then my favorite song on Fly By Night is the last song on the record, In the End. I fucking love that song. Which they also have said was also a song about being on the road, but I don't know. Great fucking song. Love that song. Love the live version too. The next album, crazy how bands would release. God, so wild how right on top of each other. You know, in this day and age, bands sometimes don't release albums. You know, they'll release albums every couple of years. Sometimes bands will take, hell, how long did Tool take? 13, 14 years between records? Insane. Bands would release records like every 6 months back then. It's crazy. Literally, they would tour, record album, go back on the road, tour, and endless cycle. And it's crazy when you think about now. I mean, it took so much longer to record a record back then because of the technology, you know, the analog technology. Now with digital technology, it's so much faster, yet, you know, modern recording techniques have not, it seems like bands take longer now to make records than they used to, because, and that's not oftentimes their fault. Oftentimes it's, you know, there's a lot more artists now, and and the labels have schedules where they won't allow you to release a record until a certain time. But man, it's crazy to think that Rush released their second and third album both in 1975, which I think also had good and bad elements to it. You know, I think there was good and bad elements of that. Certainly back then too, without the internet and without mass media, bands got forgotten about a lot quicker back then. You kind of had to do that back then. It was a different time. You know, you kind of had to release albums right on top of each other, but it also, I think, what led to a lot of mediocre albums being made by a lot of bands back then too, because they were having to rush these things. The quality wasn't as there. So they released Fly By Night and Caress of Steel both in 1975. Caress of Steel starts out with Bastille Day, which of course is about the storming of the Bastille in France. But they march out to Bastille Day. The guillotine will claim its bloody prize. I love that one. And then the next song, this is, again, Caress of Steel, you know, not my favorite album, but has some great songs on it. I Think I'm Going Bald. And apparently Neil came up with this song because Alex, this is crazy, Alex prophetically knew, you know, he's in his 20s, he kept always going on and on about how he was going to go bald one day. And he eventually did. That's why he wears rugs now. I I think I'm going by that song. It's just hilarious. I think I'm going. That's definitely a song that you write when you're smoking a lot of hash. 100%. They've admitted that. They were fucking baked out of their minds on hash making Caress of Steel. So I think you have to be high off your fucking tits to make a song called I Think I'm Going Bald for sure. The next song, Lakeside Park. I love Lakeside Park. One of my favorite songs. One of the early songs I talked about yesterday, that Brown 2 CD Rush Chronicles set. That's one that was on that. And that was a song about Neil's childhood, about growing up in St. Catharines, Ontario, in the amusement park there that he would go to. I love that song. Lakeside Park, willows in the breeze, Lakeside Park, so many memories. I just love that song. Everyone would gather on the 24th of May, sitting in the stands to watch the fireworks display, dancing fires on the beach, singing songs together. And though it's just a memory, some memories last forever. Oh, that's such a... gives me goosebumps. Oh, God. Goosebumps. Ah. Oh, fuck. Oh, man, I love Rush. For that... God, I could just... Man, Neil could just take you there. I've never been to Canada in my life. I've never been to St. Catharines. I've never seen Lakeside Park. He took me right there to it. Right there. I could feel it. I knew exactly what he was saying, exactly what he was talking about. Just incredible. God. That's, that's the magic. That's the magic of Rush. That's the magic of Neil and those lyrics, man. God. The next song, The Necromancer. That was, again, the beginning of those thematic stuff that would eventually, whether or not you like Caress of Steel or not as an album, it's another, like I was talking about earlier with Permanent Waves to Moving Pictures. It's another one of those transitional albums that was necessary in the evolution of the band. And that's why it's important. That's why it's so hard to say, what's their worst album? Because they're all important in one way or the other, because they were all leading to or coming as a result of something that came before it. So The Necromancer, of course, which is more, that was all about Sauron from The Hobbit, more Tolkien stuff. And then The Fountain of Lamneth, another long thematic piece. Again, it was described as overindulgent at the time. They talked about in interviews playing it for Paul Stanley when they were on the road with Kiss in the early days, and fucking Paul Stanley looking like he just drank sour milk when they played it for him. So that's the end of the third record, Caress of Steel, which leads us to 2112, 1976. And, what can you say about that? That was one for me as a kid when I first heard 2112. That was the one, I'd had a few of their records up to that point. That was the one all the old heads, that's the one all the old heads, they may not have heard their newer records. They may not have heard Counterparts. They may not have heard Roll the Bones. That was the one. 2112 was the one all the old heads would, 2112, man, 2112. Got to get 2112. You got 2112? Got to get 2112, man. You got to get it. That was what all the old heads were always telling me about. And then, the first time I heard it was, that's one definitely, if you listen, again, if you're a pothead, if you smoke weed and you've never in your life smoked a fucking joint and listened to the first side of 2112, what the fuck are you doing with your life? What the fuck are you doing with your life, man? Especially if you like science fiction, and sort of conspiracy stuff too. 2112, come on. A guy that leads a revolution in the future, that leads a revolution against a theocratic, religious controlled government who rules over the people using these great computers and technology. He finds this old thing in a cave, and he starts tuning it up, and it's a guitar. And he takes it to the elders and says, look at this, look what I found. Look at this thing. This is, this could really, this is something. We need to do something with this. And no, that's what brought down the old order. That's what brought down the old world, the old civilization. We don't need that. We have computers. We have technology. He leads this revolution against a tyrannical government through music. I mean, I got to tell you, man, talk about influential. Being a teenager and hearing that, even though I was born the fucking year this album came out, being a teenager in the early 90s and hearing this record, it still had as much impact as it had as ever, and still has that impact today. I mean, what a piece of work, and what a way. Can you imagine? I mean, it's just incredible that they were on the verge of being dropped by a record label and being a footnote in the history of music. And they said, fuck it, man, let's just try this and see what happens. And it's spread by word of mouth, and it's saved their career. It is the record that made Rush. There's no question about it. Had there not been a 2112, we wouldn't be sitting here talking about Rush the way we are today. No way. No way. They would have been done. They were done, basically. Caress of Steel was not widely accepted or liked at all, and they were playing really small clubs and almost on their way out at that time. So the 2112 suite takes up the whole A side, and then you get to the B side, Passage to Bangkok, the Weed Smoking song. We talked about that earlier. The Twilight Zone. As a kid, I'd seen some of the old Twilight Zones, but I hadn't seen all of them. I'd seen some reruns and stuff. So that song wasn't a favorite of mine for a while. But as I got older, and I actually went back and watched all the old original Rod Serling Twilight Zone episodes, and I listened to that song, and then I liked it more because I realized, holy shit, every lyric in this song is from an episode. I mean, this song is actually 100% from the Twilight Zone, so that's a cool one. Lessons, that's another song. I think that might be the only song on any Rush record. I could be wrong about this, but I don't think I am. I believe that to be the only song on any Rush record that Alex Lifeson has the sole songwriting credit on. Getty and Neil didn't write anything. Lessons, that's the only one. I think it's the only song that was written solely by Alex on any record. Tears is one I didn't like for a long time. I used to make fun of that song. Tears that fall from eyes that only cry. What could touch me deeper? I just thought it was silly, sappy. But I got to tell you, when I heard it on vinyl, through my vinyl setup, and I always thought it was just like real strings on there. No, the strings on that are actually done on a Mellotron. And Rush used the Mellotron a handful of times, just a couple of times throughout their career. They used it on Tears, and I don't think they used it again until Snakes and Arrows. But the Mellotron is such a fascinating keyboard instrument. It's the precursor to the sampler and sample-based music that Rush would later use. And you've heard the Mellotron. You heard it on Strawberry Fields, the intro to Strawberry Fields, the flute sound on that. The intro to Stairway to Heaven, the flute sound on that. What's interesting about, talk about a crazy analog instrument. What's crazy about the Mellotron is that the Mellotron had pre-recorded analog tape sounds recorded on that you could change out. You could change out the tapes and get different sounds. And there was an orchestral one. There was the famous flute one. And you could only, I think it's 7 seconds, something like that. You could only hold down each key for 7 seconds, and you had to let go so that the tape could cycle and loop back around. And each individual key on the keyboard has its own. I can't imagine. I can't imagine the upkeep and maintenance on one of those things. Each individual key on the keyboard has its own loop of tape, and playback head that it's attached to. It's basically like a fucking giant tape player with a individual tape player and an individual. Those things, what kind of weigh fucking 5,000 pounds? I can't imagine. And so when you press down the key on the keyboard, it's not like today where sample-based music, where you're playing back, or even like synthesis and analog synthesizers, which were approximations of sound using synthesis. When you were playing a mellotron, you were actually playing a pre-recorded recorded sound on a piece of tape when you played it. That's why it has that crazy sound to it. But what's that Led Zeppelin song? The Rain Song? Listen to the Rain Song. The orchestra sound on Led Zeppelin, the Rain Song, is the same orchestra mellotron sound on Tears by Rush. And it sounds like legit orchestra. I mean, those I thought for years, that sound on the Rain Song by Led Zeppelin, I thought for years that was a real orchestra. It's not. It's that pre-recorded tape playback keyboard from the mellotron. Incredible. Incredible. God, we like to think that we're so evolved and our technology is so much better in the digital realm, but man, that analog stuff back in the days was just, the innovation was just crazy. What else? Something for Nothing. I posted that in tribute to Neil on my Facebook pages. That's another one for me. That's another one for me where talk about inspiration as far as, truth seeking and just the whole philosophy angle that I got inspiration from Neil. That song definitely is a big influence. Those lyrics are just incredible. They really are. And apparently, I guess they were in Los Angeles or something, and Neil saw the phrase "freedom isn't free" on a spray painted on a wall, and that's where he came up with those lyrics. You don't get something for nothing. You can't have freedom for free. You won't get wise with the sleep still in your eyes, no matter what your dream might be. Great song. Great fun. I mean, I was getting all these ideas and listening to this stuff as a young kid and not even knowing even that it was inspiring me, and not even knowing that would inspire my search for truth. And it wasn't really until later on, as I got older, and I looked back on it and went, holy shit, dude. That's what, that was why I had this. One of the reasons, there's many, but definitely one of the many reasons why I began to have such this, insatiable thirst for seeking of the truth. Thank you very much. Yet again, Neil. All right, so we're moving on to the next record, A Farewell to Kings, which, of course, the title comes from the Ernest Hemingway book. As a lot, listen, you want to talk about a recurring theme all through Rush's albums, through all their songs, throughout their entire catalog, is the inspiration from literature. And of course, Sebastian Bach in the Rush documentary talks about that. Damn, this rock band's got me fired up about literature. And it's funny, it's funny the way he says that. So, no, absolutely true. I have to agree with him. There's a lot of things I wouldn't have read half of the stuff that I eventually read had I not been inspired by Neil. Definitely, I would never have checked out Ayn Rand or any of that stuff had it not been for him. So the first album on A Farewell to Kings is, of course, the song A Farewell to Kings. And then Xanadu, of course. That's one I've liked. That's one that I've I'd like to play for people who are into literature and stuff. Teachers, they hear that, and they're like, this is Samuel Taylor Coolidge ripoff. I'm like, well, yeah, but he admits that. To stand within the pleasure dome decreed by Kubla Khan. And, yeah, that's what it was inspired by, the poem Kubla Khan by Samuel Taylor Coolidge. Xanadu, whoo! What a fucking amazing song. I love the intro part. I love Alex's guitar work on that, where it's one of my favorite things to do too, where he's taking a volume pedal and using it to do swells to where it almost makes it sound like a violin. Brian May did that a lot too. Of course, Closer to the Heart. I would say Closer to the Heart, second to, I would say even more so than like even Limelight or some of the other songs off of Moving Pictures. I would say Closer to the Heart would have to be the second most loved and identifiable track by Rush out of all their songs. Unquestionably. I think that, if you ask somebody that maybe isn't a big Rush fan to name two songs, I think the two most common ones that you hear named usually are Tom Sawyer and, of course, Closer to the Heart. And, again, what else can you say about that? Fantastic song. And one that they played for many, many years and got tired of playing and didn't play for a long time. Cinderella Man, inspired by Mr. Deeds Goes to Town. So many, so many of Neil's tracks, songs, lyrics, all inspired by literature. Madrigal. And then you get into Cygnus X1, Book 1, The Voyage, the last song on Farewell to Kings. I just love that was one for me that I didn't realize until I got later into doing research and stuff and learning about how these ancient civilizations would align their different temples and stuff to these different stars and astrological points. And then when I went back and listened to Cygnus X1 from A Farewell to Kings, I went, oh, he's referencing that. Because, it talks about the black hole and, that you can hear Neil, that's Neil's voice again on that, the black hole, that's Cygnus X1. You can hear say that on the song. But, and then I saw this documentary one time about how there was some sort of like supernova or something from Cygnus that the particles from it are still being detected on Earth, and how they think that like the evolution of humans on Earth may have been caused by this, stardust and star matter that came from this explosion from this supernova. And this was not known until years after Neil wrote this song. So I just thought that was fascinating, Set a course just east of Lyra, northwest of Pegasus, flew into the hot light of Deneb, sailed across the Milky Way. On my ship, the Rosencontre, wheeling through the galaxies, headed to the heart of Cygnus, headlong into mystery. I mean, it's like you listen to it and it's just, you're there. You're like it's so upjoyous and like, but like you realize he's talking about heading into a fucking black hole. You're like, how could it be so uplifting and joyous singing like that? Headlong into mystery, headlong into death, motherfucker. You're heading into a fucking black hole. But then you realize, hey, the black hole's not the end. It's actually the entryway, the portal to something else. And that's how the album ends. And then the next album you get picks up right where that left off on Hemispheres. So the last track on Farewell to Kings is Cygnus X1, Book 1, The Voyage. And then it starts out with Cygnus X1, Book 2, Hemispheres. Prelude, Apollo, Dionysus, Armageddon, Cygnus, and the Sphere. And that's all of side one. Hemispheres and 2112 are very similar in that fact, where the piece, the the opening piece is 20 minutes long or whatever, and then the B-side of the album doesn't have anything to do with the story that they're presenting to you. Whereas it's different on A Farewell to Kings, where the stuff that has to do with the story isn't any of the songs on side A. In fact, none of the stuff that has to do with the story doesn't start until the B-side, which is different from 2112 and Hemisphere. So, and then you get into side B, Hemisphere Circumstances. Another fucking great one. Just another one of those great lyrics. And in the French stuff, plus c'est champ, plus c'est la même chose, the more that things change, the more they stay the same. And that's another interesting thing about Neil is Neil could take, everybody knows that he could take complex ideas and complex things and really bring them right down to an easily digestible thing that people could easily understand. But and that gets talked about a lot, but I think what doesn't get talked about enough is how he also takes very simple things and then you listen to it and you're like, oh, I didn't know that's what it was about. Like the song Circumstances. When you listen to that song, all the same, we take our chances, laughed by time, tricked by circumstances, plus c'est champ, plus c'est la même chose, the more that things change, the more they stay the same. That's just a simple thing about him being on his own, going to England when he was 18 and being on his own and trying to make it as a musician. It's really nothing complex at all about it. But when you listen to it, it sounds way more deeper than that. That's such a magic trick, dude, to be able to take, complex things and make them understandable, but also to take simple things and make them sound complex. That's fucking sorcery, man. That is fucking sorcery right there. And, it might be a good time to mention this, as I don't think I really mentioned this enough previously, especially in part one, that's the thing about Rush. As a Rush fan, one of the things that I've gotten the most of the years is you tell somebody you're a Rush fan, they're like, oh, you're a Rush fan? Oh, man, you must like Dream Theater too. Ooh, let's listen to some Wrong. Fuck Dream Theater. Listen. You got to have songs, dude. You got to have songs. You got to have catchy. You got to have toe tappers. You got to have stuff that sticks in people's heads. Just being simply a wanker and being simply a guy that can play a million notes a second doesn't get it done. That's the great thing about Rush. Yes, they were fantastic, amazing, top-notch musicians. Yes, they used crazy time signatures with a fuck ton of notes and shredding and crazy drumming and all that. But it never got in the way of them having songs. They got tunes, dude. You gotta have tunes, man. You gotta have tunes. Period. If you don't have tunes, you don't have shit. And Dream Theater, they ain't got tunes, dude. They might all be the best you can be. I mean, listen, the guys in Rush none of those guys were classically trained musicians. Those guys, they were high school dropouts. All of them. They didn't go to the Musicians Institute of Technology and become, classically trained musicians and then formed a band at school. That's what Dream Theater was all a bunch of rich guys whose parents all had money, who all could afford to send them to the Musicians Institute of Technology, where they all got classically trained. That's the most prestigious music school in the world. And they met while they were at school there and formed Dream Theater. But guess what? All the money in the world and all the training in the world will not buy you tunes, bro. And Dream Theater doesn't have any tunes. Not a toe tapper in their collection do they have. Not a one. It's just a bunch of shredding, wanking bullshit with no substance. And again, just because you're a Rush fan does not make you a fucking Dream Theater fan. I get, so sick of that. I'm not a Dream Theater fan. Never have I been, nor will I ever be. However, Mike Portnoy, who, by the way, he even got tired of their shit and quit, was a founding member of the band. He was very close friends with Neil. And actually, I saw an article today talking about how he knew for 2 years about Neil's illness. I will say this, though. If there's, I don't know for a fact, I feel like probably there's something coming. Some sort of tribute concert, something at some point. I don't know. But, I have a feeling they'll probably do some kind of tribute concert for charity or something at some point. And I imagine they'll probably, the two remaining members, Geddy and Alex of Rush, will probably do like a rotating drummer thing with some of Neil's, famous drummer friends. Mike Portnoy would definitely be the top of that list. Danny Carey from Tool would be on that list. Steve Smith from Journey would be on that list. Stuart Copeland from The Police would be on that list. Those are all guys who he was very, very, very close with, friends with, hung out with. Do I think that they'll continue Rush and make more Rush music and have Mike Portnoy on with him and make another record tour? Absolutely not. No, I don't think so at all. Nah. But then again, I don't know. I don't think so. But then again, we don't know. You never know. I mean, I think it's crazy that the day before Neil died, a story came out where there was a rumor going around that Mike Portnoy, formerly of Dream Theater, was going to either tour or do a live tour for a 40th anniversary of the Permanent Waves record and play drums with Rush, which he immediately shot down. And then 3 days later, we hear Neil's pass. So I think there could be something. Who knows? Maybe Neil wrote, maybe he wrote a bunch of lyrics in his final days. Again, this is theoretical. I don't know this for a fact, but maybe. I do know that I read an article today where Mike Portnoy was saying, he was in contact for the past couple of years with Neil, and Neil would send him emails on the regular and stuff, long. And he said, if you've ever read Neil's books, these emails that he sent me were like his books. So, I mean, is it possible that maybe Neil wrote some lyrics and maybe he, as one of his dying wishes or something, said, I'd like the guys to take these lyrics and put music to them, and I'd like my buddy Mike Portnoy to play my drum parts on it? It's possible. I mean, it is possible. Do I think that that's going to happen? Probably not, but it could. It's not beyond the realm of possibility. And if there's anybody that could do it and do Neil justice, it would be Mike Portnoy for sure. Next song on Hemispheres, The Trees. That song clearly, you can clearly hear what that's about, and that's clearly influenced by. I think The Trees has more relevance in today's political landscape than it ever does, especially in terms of liberalism and, the trees were all kept equal by hatchet, axe, and saw. These people over here have more money than us, or in the case of the trees, trees have more sunlight. So what do we do? Well, we'll just chop the tops off all the trees so that no one has to have, a richer and poorer. There doesn't have to be people that get less light than these trees over here. So let's just chop them all down. So now everybody's equal. And, this is very much a statement on liberalism and stuff. But what I didn't know is that Neil once said that song was inspired by the Lorax from Dr. Seuss, which I thought was kind of crazy. The next track, La Villa Strangiato. Jesus. What a lot of people don't know is that La Villa Strangiato, when you listen to it, it just sounds like one seamless song, that goes on for however long it goes on for, 20 minutes or whatever. It's actually a multi-part instrumental. The first part's called Buenos Noches, Mean Freunds. Part 2, To Sleep, Penchants to Dream. Part 3, Strangiato Theme. Part 4, A Lurkst in Wonderland. If you're not familiar with what Lurkst is, Alex. They all had a bunch of nicknames for each other, and the main 3 nicknames for the 3 members of the band were Lurkst, which is Alex, Pratt, which is Neil, and Dirk, which is Geddy. So Part 4, Lurkst in Wonderland. Part 5, Monsters. Part 6, The Gods of the Aragon. Part 7, Danforth and Pape. Part 8, The Waltz of the Shreeves. Part 9, Never Turn Your Back on a Monster. Part 10, Monsters, reprise. 11, Strangiato Theme, reprise. 12, A Farewell to Things. And this is an instrumental. The whole thing is an instrumental based on the dreams of Alex Lifeson. That's interesting, isn't it? A lot of people don't know that about La Villa Strangiato. But God, what a song. Oh, talk about the musicianship. Whew. And they've even said themselves that was, they were pushing the boundaries of their own musicianship with La Villa Strangiato and how long it took them to record that and how grueling it was. And again, Hemispheres was yet another important transitional album that led to the transition that they made for the next record, Permanent Waves. So they end Hemispheres with the long La Villa Strangiato, and then they come out of the gates of Permanent Waves with, I mean, if you can put on Spirit of Radio, if you're in a bad mood and you put on Spirit of Radio, and that song doesn't get you up and get you in a bad mood, just go ahead and kill yourself. Man. It just gets you going. It's a great song. And in talking of the radio beam, it's called Spirit of the Radio. When it comes on the radio, it's just a perfect radio track, And that's what Permanent Waves was. It was a transition from the longer thematic songs into, more compact songs that still had all of the elements that everyone loved about Rush. You still had the fantastic lyrics. You still had the virtuosic musicianship. You just did it, in 3 or 4 minutes instead of 12 or 20 minutes. So the album kicks off with Spirit of the Radio and goes to Free Will. Oh, man, there's a quote in the documentary where their producer Terry Brown says, when you're changing time signatures at whim and your audience is largely unaware of it, then you've got something special. And, when you hear that song, dude, that song is in 13/4 time. What? The fuck? The fuck you thinking? Talk about fucking math rock. That's some motherfucking math rock right there for your ass. 13/4? Dude, I'm a drummer. If somebody in my band, if I was in a band, somebody in my band came and said, all right, guys, got a new song for you. It's in 13/4 time. I would throw my drumsticks at them and walk out the fucking door. Fuck you! Fuck you, Jack. You play no 13/4. Kiss my ass. You better get yourself a drum machine. Fuck you. 13/4. 13/4? Better suck my dick, 13/4. What the flying fuck are you thinking? And of course, Neil just like, yeah, 13/4. Here, let's do it. Jesus. That's the thing about, again, he did the same thing drum-wise and music-wise as he did lyric-wise. Just as I was talking about earlier. taking a complex theme and making it easily digestible, or on the flip side of that, taking a very banal thing like, getting used to living in another country or something, and then making it sound more deep and complex than it actually is. He had that same ability with his drum parts where, like you think like Tom Sawyer, right? Their biggest song, their most identifiable song. Everybody knows that song. Everybody air drummed along to that song. The middle part with the fucking tom rolls and all that. But you know what's interesting about that song? A lot of people may not know this unless you're a drummer. Here's what's interesting about that song. Guess what? Guess what time signature that song's in? It's 4/4. It's 4/4, baby. It's 4 on the floor. It's a simple 4/4 song. You could actually just play that song, do cha, do cha, do. But Neil's a do cha. He takes a simple 4/4 beat and makes that shit sound complex and difficult. It's not. It's a simple 4/4 beat. But Neil could take a simple 4/4 beat and play it in a way to where when you heard it, it sounded difficult and complex to you. And it really was. Again, that's a fucking magician. That's a fucking wizard, dude. It takes a wizard to take a simple 4/4 beat and make that shit sound like it's more difficult than it is. In the next song, another great example of that. The next song on Permanent Waves, Jacob's Ladder. I always thought the song Jacob's Ladder was about, like Jacob in the Bible and seeing the UFOs and the beams coming down from the UFOs and taking Jacob up in the fucking UFOs. That's what I thought the Rush song Jacob's Ladder was about. That's the only song I never got to see live that I wish I would have got to see live that they played on the R40 tour that I didn't get to go to in 2015. That's the only song that I'm a little salty about that I didn't get to see because they never would play that song live past, I think, 81, past the Moving Pictures tour. Then they brought it back out. But I always thought, you listen to it, and it's a very, plodding, difficult, complex song. And again, I always thought it was about the Jacob's Ladder Bible stuff and, him going up in the UFOs and all that. And then I found out it's just a song about sunbeams. That's it. It's simply a song about fucking sunbeams. That's it. It's not about Jacob going up in the UFOs or anything. It's a, you're like, what? It's just a song about sunbeams. That's it. That's it. But leave it to Neil to take a fucking simple idea like simply sunbeams and turn it into the song Jacob's Ladder with all that complex arrangement and the synthesizers and the crazy vocoder stuff. Wizards, man, wizards. Entree New, the next song. Oh, that's a great one. That's another one they did on the Snakes and Arrows tour that I was glad I got to see. Different Strings. That's another good one. And then the album closes with, of course, as I talked about earlier, Natural Science. And Natural Science is another one of those. It sounds like one seamless song, but it's actually 3 parts. Tide Pools, Hyperspace, and Permanent Waves. And that brings us to, of course, Moving Pictures. And boy, Moving Pictures. Again, their biggest selling album, most identifiable album, the album that Neil himself said he feels like is the album when they really became Rush. Talk about a perfect record. Not a bad song. And there's a lot of records like, not a lot of Rush records like that where there's not a bad song with a bunch. But Moving Pictures, is just the full expression of a perfect record. Perfect record from front to back. Tom Sawyer, Red Barchetta, YYZ, Limelight, The Camera Eye, Witch Hunt, and then Vital Signs. What a fucking amazing record. And again, Tom Sawyer, that song, I mean, that is really, it is considered the quintessential Rush song. And that is, and it's got that, very much that swagger of youth in it, His mind is not for rent to any god or government, always hopeful yet discontent. He knows changes aren't permanent, but change is. I mean, another one of those ones that just, you didn't even know. I didn't even know. You didn't even know it was influencing you. You didn't even know that it was shaping you and shaping your personality and who you were as a youngster when you were hearing it. And then you grow up and you look back and you go, God damn, I am Tom Sawyer. And that's the whole point. That's what Neil was trying to say. Yes, we all are. If you choose to think in a certain way and live your life outside of the mainstream and outside of consensus reality, that's why he wrote that song. He wasn't talking just about himself or some fictional character or something. He was talking about himself, and he was talking about you, and he was talking about me, and he was talking about anybody who chooses to carry themselves and live their life in a different way than what the mainstream of people do. I mean, the term genius gets thrown around too much, but God, it's that subtle genius that Neil had that sometimes you wouldn't even recognize the genius of until years later. There's so many things like that with Rush. And so many things like that in life, too. There's movies, there's books, there's music. But I love when that happens. When you go back and you watch a movie you haven't watched for, 10, 20, 30 years, some cases, and you go back and watch it. And you remember you liked the movie, but you hadn't seen it in a long time. You go back and you watch it again, and it has a totally different meaning to you than it did when you first saw it. And it almost seems like a different movie or different book and what's changed? The book hasn't changed. The movie hasn't changed. That song or that record hasn't changed. You changed. In that time, you changed. And so because you changed during that time, the book or the movie or the album or the song or whatever has a totally different meaning and a totally different understanding to you than it did when you first heard it. Because you've changed and you've grown and you've evolved. And I love that. And that there's so much of Rush's music like that, where there's songs that I go back and listen to them now, and they have a meaning different to me than they did 10, 20, 30 years ago. And that's where you realize the genius of Neil Peart and the genius of those lyrics and the music, is when they have a totally different meaning to you now than they did initially. Red Barchetta, the second song on Moving Pictures, that was inspired by an article that he read in, I think it was Car and Driver magazine. But man, talk about the perfect blending, growing up being a sci-fi fan my whole life, in that blending of futuristic themes with those great lyrics and that fantastically complex music. Again, it's just something you're never going to get ever again. Not in that way. Because, again, yes, it was complex. Yes, you had those thematic themes in there, but goddamn, they were still catchy songs that could be played on the radio. Red Barchetta, that song to me, it has more meaning now in the day and age we live in now than it did even at the time, and predicted the future in a lot of ways. Because, now we've got, this is long before there was, the environmental freak out stuff there is now and, electric cars and all this. But here's Neil writing this story and writing this song about this future time where gasoline cars are outlawed. There's flying cars and electric eye, camera surveillance. It's like we're living in now, watching everything. My uncle has a country place no one knows about. He says it used to be a farm before the motor law. And on Sundays I elude the eyes and hop the turbine freight too far outside the wire where my white-haired uncle waits. And then the music. So the lyrics and the music are both relating that feeling and that in the horsepower of a gasoline car, because it's based on the red Barchetta. The Barchetta it was Neil's favorite car. The Ferrari 650. That's what I believe that's what it was. No, not the 650. What was the name of that? That's the new one, the 550. What was it? Was it the one? Well, yeah, the 166. Yeah, that's what it was. The 166S. Yeah, which was produced between 1948 and 1953. That's what the song was based on. The Barchetta, the Ferrari 166S Barchetta, Neil's favorite car. Neil had quite the collection of cars, especially Aston Martins. I think he had like 10 silver different model Aston Martins. But what that song is portraying thematically through the lyrics and lyrically, it's also doing it in the music. Like, jump to the ground as the turbo slows across the borderline. Run like the wind as excitement shivers up and down my spine. Down in his barn, my uncle preserved for me an old machine for 50-odd years to keep it as new as been his dearest dream. And then the music changes again. I strip away the old debris that hides the shining car. A brilliant red Barchetta from a better vanished time. I fire up the whirling engine, responding with a roar. Tires spitting gravel, I commit my weekly crime. And then right there it goes, and the guitar kind of, and then it goes, bump, 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 and you can feel the music shifts gears when it goes from that I commit my weekly crime part into the wind in my hair, dun 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 dun. It's insane. Never in music history has there ever been anything like this where the music is shifting gears and you feel it. When the lyrics kick in and it kicks in that part, you feel like the gearbox in the car upshifting, and you're right there. You're right there in it. Wind in my hair, ding, bum, bum, shifting and lifting, ding, bum, 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 mechanical music, ding. And I mean, it's insane. And then it goes, adrenaline surge. It shifts again. Time shifts again. The music shifts again. Each section of the song is shifting like the gearbox in a fucking beautiful, fast, gas-powered car. I mean, nobody else. I'm here to tell you guys. I've been listening to records my whole life. I'm here to tell you, ain't nobody ever done anything like that. And it just goes over it goes over the heads of probably almost everybody except musicians and certain people that listen to that. I mean, to be able to write music that also is getting across exactly what the lyrics are trying to say like that and do it in such a way. I mean, talk about it, almost impossible. And I think that's why that record and that song had such an impact on people. They don't even know why it's impacting the way it is. The time signatures and the music are shifting like the gears of the car, and you're right there. You're in it. You're in the car. Drive like the wind, straining the limits of machine and man. Laughing out loud with fear and hope, I got a desperate plan. At the one-lane bridge, I leave the giant stranded at the riverside. Raised back to the farm to dream with my uncle at the fireside. I mean, you're right there. You're in it all the way front to back. And I think that's why, again, that's why those, that's why the songs are still so loved and listened to and played on the radio so days because it never gets boring. It's not just some banal pop throwaway crap. It's something it's true craftsmanship. It's like, like like an old Craftsman house, or, nice old 50s or 60s Gibson Les Paul, or, true craftsmanship, love, something that stands the test of time. And God, that's what so many of Rush's songs were like. Man, that fucking Red Barchetta, I tell you what, again, it just takes you there. And then after that, of course, you got YYZ, which was inspired by it's like what do you call it? Like a Morse code signal from like an airport. That's what they got that whole rhythm from. And then, of course, Limelight, as we talked about yesterday, really, the full expression of Neil and his feelings of, going from just being a musician to being a widely known star, and having to deal with what that entails. And, listen, I'm nobody, but I do have fans, and I do have people who I have fans all over the world. It may not be millions of people, but I, in my own small way, believe it or not, have had to deal with that kind of thing. And when I was younger, I was like, well, why would he feel like that? When I was younger, I was like, that doesn't make sense. Why not, embrace your fans? And as I've gotten older and I've had to deal with that kind of thing myself, and deal with, people who look at you, view you a certain way because of, what you've done and stuff. I have to say, I do see his point now more than I ever did. Let's see here. The next song, of course, is The Camera Eye. I talked about that earlier, the performance of that. Oh, fantastic. Great song. And then Witch Hunt. And then it closes out with Vital Signs, which is, they got stuff in there like Random Sample, Hold the One You Need. Random Sample, Hold and stuff. That's from that was stuff that they took from a lot of the music gear and whatnot that would have been in the studios during those days. And then that brings to the next album, Subdivisions, from the first track on the Signals album in 1982. And, I really got to hand it to Rush. Signals is a very divisive record. A lot of Rush fans don't like the Signals record for whatever reason. I'm not necessarily crazy about the last song on the album, which is called Countdown, which was inspired by the first space shuttle flight. I don't really dig that song that much. But the rest of the album I love. Going back to Witch Hunt, though, the next and last song on Moving Pictures, that's part of something called the Fear Trilogy. And what's interesting is that when you first got Moving Pictures, you'll notice that it was called Fear Part 3. But when you went back and looked at all the other albums, you noticed there wasn't a Fear Part 2 or Fear Part 1 on any of the other albums, so what the fuck? And then when you got Signals, when it came out, Signals in 82 had Fear Part 2 on it. You're like, wait a minute, what the fuck is going on here? And he did it in reverse, and supposedly that's the same thing they did with 2112, A Farewell to Kings, and Hemispheres. Whereas they came out in that order, and they're all three a part of one continuous story. But the real order, to listen to them properly, you're supposed to listen to them backwards. Which means you're supposed to listen to the first side of Hemispheres first, then the second side of A Farewell to Kings, then the first side of 2112. So they did that on the three subsequent next albums with the Fear Trilogy. which actually ended up being 4 parts. Later on, we'll get to that. But so Witch Hunt was Fear Part 3, which is all about the fear of mob mentality and stuff like that, and you know, sort of the really more valid today than I guess it probably ever has been. And then when you get to Signals in 82, then you get Fear Part 2 there with the song The Weapon. And then when you get to the next album, Grace Under Pressure, you get my favorite song in the series, which is The Enemy Within. So it's like mob fear, internal fear, external fear. And then he would also later end up doing a part 4 on the Vapor Trails record. So Signal starts out with Subdivisions. Really, boy, if you grew up in the suburbs and felt alienated from the mainstream and alienated from the cool kids, there's no better anthem for geeks and nerds and outcasts than Subdivisions. And the video very much portrays that as well. And the next song is The Analog Kid, another one of my all-time favorite songs. Glad I got to see them play that twice live. And also on the album is the song Digital Man. So you have the Analog Kid and you have the Digital Man. And a lot of Rush fans through the years have speculated and wondered exactly who Neil is talking about. You know, what's he talking about here? Obviously, he's talking about, you know, youth and, you know, the older age and everything being analog and stuff like that. And then now in the modern age with everything being digital and stuff. But you got to remember, this is 1982. It was just the burgeoning of the digital age was just happening there. And so a lot of people have wondered, you know, well, who's he talking about? You know, who's he really talking about? Who is the Analog Kid? Who is the Digital Man? And I know. Should I tell you or should I be a dick and keep it to myself? I'll tell you. No, actually, it's Neil. Guess that's probably not a surprise. Neil is both the Analog Kid and the Digital Man. And he wrote those songs. If you read the lyrics, he's got that stuff in the Analog Kid about, I don't have the lyrics in front of me, but the fawn-eyed girl with some brown legs dances on the edge of his dream, and her voice rings in his ears like the music of the spheres. And he says something about the boy lies in the grass staring at the sky. His mother starts to call him as a hawk goes soaring by. The boy pulls down his baseball cap and covers up his eyes. That's Neil. And so that's, you know, that both the song Analog Kid was about his youth and being a boy growing up, and then, you know, the reconciling that of the grown up and being the digital man, and he's got a what does it say in that song? He's got a force field and a flexible plan. He's got a date with fate in a black sedan. He plays fast forward just as long as he can, but he won't need a bed because he's a digital man. He'd love to spend the night in Zion. He's been a long while in Babylon. He'd like a lover's wings to fly on to a tropical isle Avalon. That's subdivided and synthetic. It's that whole idea of, you know, the digital, just like the digital age is supposed to be the new and the better thing, and it's the future, and it's supposed to be better. But then we also look back and we see, well, is it really? Is it though? Is it really better? You know, just like they convince us that digital music and CDs and all that. I mean, Neil, talk about being way ahead of his time with these lyrics. Jesus Christ. You know, we're sold on this idea that the digital revolution was the future, but is it though? Because when you look back at the analog time, it seems like the analog time was much more enjoyable. And it's insane that in 1982, Neil was already expressing that idea of the analog kid and youth versus the digital man in the future and being an adult, and how it's supposed to be better, but it really isn't better. It's just more complex, and instead of dreaming about being a grown-up and being an adult as you do as a child, you're an adult now wishing you could go back to to being a child again. It's just so, I mean, God damn. Again, one of the reason 5,233 of why fucking, why I'm doing this show and why I've been a Rush fan my whole life. It's just so much more. That's, I guess at the end of the day, that's the thing that you have to say the most about Neil and Rush and the whole thing is that it's so much more. And that's what you can't make people who aren't Rush fans understand, is that they are more than, to put them even in the same category as any other rock band or anything else like that out there. It's just not even fair. Not neither to any other band or to them, It's just so much more than a band or just a regular rock band, So much deeper and so much more to dive into. And then, of course, you had Chemistry. That's another great song. Chemistry is a significant song. I'm glad I got to see him play that one live, too. That is a significant song because it's the first time that all three members of Rush collaborated on a song lyrically. All three members contributed lyrics to that song, which is really awesome. The Weapon, New World Man, of course. New World Man, which was highly influenced, and admittedly, they admitted it by the Police. You can hear that ding, 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 that sort of reggae upbeat Police sound in there. Yeah, very much so. And then that brings us to Grace Under Pressure, 1984. Distant Early Warning, that was very much a sort of a Red Scare, very much of the times as far as, everybody thinking we were going to get nuked. Just very much a Cold War. Love that song, though. World weighs on my shoulders, but what am I to do? But the title, Distant Early Warning itself, comes from the systems of NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command, Distant Early Warning Systems. So they can tell when somebody else launches nukes, so we can in turn nuke them back, mutually assured destruction, that whole thing. Which was very much the fear in the 80s, so that song's definitely very much of the times. After Image, definitely a song a lot of people are playing right now, fittingly, because the lyrics kind of definitely, are fitting towards the passing of Neil. Suddenly you were gone from all the lives you left your mark upon. Red Sector 8, what's, again, another one of those examples of how Geddy was able, it's just, the ability, again, it's something I don't think should be overlooked, is Geddy's ability to be able to take those Neil words and not only create and craft music around them, but also, again, it's very difficult to take words you didn't write and express them emotionally in a way to where if somebody didn't know any better when they listened to it, where they would think you did write it. And, Geddy's parents, Neil's parents weren't Holocaust survivors, but Geddy's parents were. Both his mother and father survived the Holocaust. They were in concentration camps. They were in Nazi concentration camps and survived. And Geddy's grandmother didn't. And Neil, you would think Geddy, his family came from that. Neil didn't come from that, but he was able to write a song about it. Red Sector A. And because, Geddy knew of his family and had the emotional baggage of knowing he had his grandmother and grandfather and stuff die in concentration camps, he was able to take those lyrics that he didn't write and deliver that song in such a way where you really, really feel it when he sings it. It's amazing. The Enemy Within. Oh, I love that song. Oh man, that's one I jam that song. That's one of my favorite all-time favorite Rush songs is The Enemy Within, part 1 of the Fear trilogy, or quadrilogy, however you want to view it. I'm not giving in to security under pressure. I'm not missing out on the promise of adventure. I'm not giving up on implausible dreams. Experience to extremes. Experience to extremes. I love the middle part's my favorite part. To you, is it movement or is it action? Is it contact or just reaction? A new evolution. Touch resistance. Is it living or just existence? Yeah, you. Takes a little more persistence to get up and go the distance. I love that. Bow. I mean, talk about just the drumming. It's just a full-on rocker. What a fucking great song. The Body Electric, Kid Gloves, Red Lenses, Between the Wheels. I love the song Between the Wheels, but I kind of got tired of it because they brought that back on. It's a great song, but they brought it back, I think, on the 30th anniversary tour. And I don't think they'd even played it maybe ever live, or maybe they played it in the early days of the tour for Race Under Pressure. But they wore it out. They wore it the fuck out towards the end. They played it on, I think, almost every tour from like the 30th anniversary tour on. And I got a little tired of it because I would have rather heard The Enemy Within, which they never played again or something like that. But it's, it's a cool song. I just got tired of hearing it after a while because they were wearing it out towards the end, which I understand. That brings us to the Power Windows album in 1985. I mentioned this on the previous show. Power Windows was the first digitally recorded Rush album. And it's interesting to listen to those early digitally recorded albums and then listen to them on an analog format like vinyl. Because you sort of get kind of the best of both worlds with it. I like that. I like that sound. The Dire Straits Brothers in Arms album was like that as well, recorded around the same time. Power Windows was really Power Windows is another divisive album because as they slowly became more synthesizer-based and had more heavier influence with synthesizers with Signals and Grace Under Pressure, Power Windows was the real fucking, thick synthesizer. A lot of people don't like the Power Windows record. I didn't necessarily like it or get it when I was a young teenager, but as I got older and became a musician and got into synthesizers and stuff myself, now it's one of my favorites. I like it just as much as any other records, and really had some. Another thing I didn't like it. This is hilarious. This will make you laugh really hard, especially if you know what I do with my other show. When I was a teenager, I didn't like Power Windows songs that much because I thought they were too political, and I didn't like political music back then. I was all, I don't want to hear political music. I just want escapism. I don't want to hear about politics. That's how it was when I was like 16. Yeah, I was 16. Come on. But now I listen to that and I realize, oh shit, he was actually, he was getting into some deep shit, but it was way over my head at 16 years old. So that album starts out with the Big Money. Big money runs around the world. Big money, take a cruise. Grand Designs. I think Grand Designs might be. It's a great record. God, every song on that record's good. I don't know why. It was just, being young and dumb. But yeah, Power Windows is just as great as any album they made. The Big Money, Grand Designs, Manhattan Project, Marathon, Territories, Middletown Dreams, and Emotion Detector. Shit. Yeah. Wow. So Grand Designs is inspired by the District of Columbia trilogy book. Manhattan Project, not hard to tell what that's about. The atomic bombs. Marathon, that's one of my favorite ones. Especially the performance of that one on the Show of Hands thing. I mean, there's like three different time signatures going on at once in that song. Neil's like playing one time signature and Geddy is playing a different time signature on the bass. Then he's singing in a different time signature. Talk about got to get your calculator out and do some math rock. Jesus. It's like and Neil's going doing one beat And then he's singing, it's not how fast you can go. The forest into the flow. You think that's just a like da 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 beat like that, right? Like da 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 da. That's the beat. But this is the bass line. Wait, da 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 da. This is the bass line he's playing over that. Doom 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 doom. You're like, what? There's like fucking 3 times you just go on at once in that song. Why? How? The fuck? Oh, I mean, I just like, what fucking planet are you guys from? Jesus. Yeah, play. I mean, listen, before the other songs, they're switching around between times. This one's got 3 time signatures at once. It's not even right. My God. Territories. I like that song more now than I did. I used to not like it that much. Middletown Dreams. That's another good one. Emotion Detector. Originally intended to be a ballad. Thank God they changed the course on that one. And then, of course, it closes with probably most people's favorite song from Power Windows, Mystic Rhythms. Mystic rhythms, capture my thoughts, carry them away. Another one of those ones where it's not really, maybe you can't tell from the lyrics or listen to what it's really about. The more we think we know about, the greater the unknown. It's actually, Neil said it's about astrology, which is crazy. Because when you listen to it, you're like, that's about astrology? And then you hear him say that, and you're like, okay, well, now, okay, I get it now. It makes perfect sense. Of course it is. So that's the end of Power Windows. Then we move on to Hold Your Fire. Hold Your Fire has Force 10. Love that song. Force 10, Time Stands Still. Open Secrets. That's another one influenced by T.S. Eliot. Second Nature, that song is probably one of my least favorites. Although when I heard it on the record recently, again, stuff sounds different now, but I never liked the lyrics in that. People are basically decent, conventional wisdom would say. Ugh. So the lyrics are just bad in that song. But I don't hate it as much as I do, but it's definitely as I used to, but it's definitely not one of my favorites. Prime Mover, that's a good one. Another one of the songs that he said was inspired by Aristotle and Plato, and you're like, I didn't get that from those lyrics, but okay. Lock and Key, that's another good one. Mission, that's another one of my favorites. I always like the line in Mission, if their lives were exotic and strange, they would likely have gladly exchanged them for something a little more plain, maybe something a little more sane. And then you find out that he was talking about like Van Gogh and Virginia Woolf and F. Scott Fitzgerald. You're like, God, again. Then you hear that and it makes total sense, but you would never have guessed that in a million years. Just listen to the lyrics, Turn the Page. That's another one that had some crazy, like 3 fucking time signatures going on at once. Tai Shan, yeah, China sang to me. I went to the top of the mountain, China sang. Yeah, no, probably, I would have to say that Tai Shan is probably the most widely hated song in all of the Rush catalog by Rush fans. Is 100% has to be Tai Shan. Against another one, I listened to it on vinyl recently. I used to not like it either. But, it's kind of, as you get older, and especially as, your favorite bands, start to die off and stuff. It's just like with Queen, there used to be certain Queen songs that I used to not like, and now I'm going to listen to them now, and I love them. They're great. Because now any Queen song, any Queen song is better than no Queen song. Any song with Freddie Mercury singing is better than no. And even before Neil passed, I was kind of starting to feel that way about certain Rush songs that, weren't necessarily my favorite in the past, but, any Rush song is better than no Rush song now, I think. And then High Water closes out the album. Then we move on to Presto. Again, I talked about that earlier. Presto. Favorite standout songs from that? The Pass, definitely. And The Pass is a song all about suicide. So if you ever had someone pass away from suicide, or that's one the band really, really loved to perform and really held close to their hearts. Definitely one of the best songs on Presto. Again, Presto, widely hated album. It's often called the worst Rush album there is. I don't agree. Standouts on the album for me, definitely The Pass. I liked Warpaint. I like that record, man. I like a lot of the songs on it. Yeah, now I'm looking at the track list. Damn, yeah, I guess I never realized it. The Pass, let's see, what's the first song? Chain Lightning? No, the first song is Show Don't Tell. God. So let's do this. Let's run down the list of Presto. Show Don't Tell, great song. Chain Lightning, pretty good. The Pass, wonderful song. Warpaint, I like, that's the one. Boys and girls together. I like that song. Scars of pleasure, scars of pain. Atmospheric changes make them sensitive again. Presto, that's another one they did. If I could wave my magic wand. Oh, I love that song. Superconductor, that one's okay. Anagram, it's all right. Red Tide, it's all right. Hand Over Fist, it's all right. Available Light. So let's see. So maybe 3 songs out of 9 on there that maybe aren't my favorites. That doesn't make it the worst album they ever made. Available Light's another great song. In the available light. Dude, come on. Yeah, definitely don't think it's is it a worse album than I don't know. Again, a lot of these songs, yeah, they're not your favorite on the records, but definitely translated and were good live. That brings us to Roll the Bones. Oh, Dreamline. Love that song. Another fantastic fan favorite live. Bravado. Bravado is the one I was trying to think of in part 1 yesterday at the 30th anniversary tour when everybody sat down and I was the only one standing up. And I could see the band looking at me too. I had good seats for that. And I could see the band looking at me and they acknowledged I was the only person standing. I could see there's Alex kind of was like during playing the guitar part. He was fucking looking right at me, man. Like right at me. We will pay the price, but we will not count the cost. I was the only person in that whole fucking place standing up. And I saw Alex like fucking looking, like he was acknowledging me like, you're the man, Roll the Bones, love that song. Got the rap section in there. Face Up, Where's My Thing? Where's My Thing is one that is an instrumental that they played a lot, even in the later days. The Big Wheel, that's okay. Heresy, it's okay. Berlin Wall song. Ghost of a Chance, that I talked about that one earlier. Love that one. It's definitely, I think one of the 2 songs we actually even had the word love in there. Neurotica, that was an okay song. You Bet Your Life. I would say, honestly, there are some great songs on Roll the Bones. Specifically, Dreamline, Bravado, Roll the Bones, Where's My Thing, and Ghost of a Chance. And I think that's why I put those records in together earlier. They actually, both Presto and Roll the Bones, it's crazy. They both have about the equal amount of good songs and not so good songs. And they came out almost right on top of each other, and they didn't change their live setup much for that. And then that brings us to Counterparts. And that's the one where they really stripped it down and we really went more back to a raw. It was all recorded analog, all analog gear. Animate, that's a great one. They had the Beavis and Butthead video for that. Or no, Stick It Out was the one, which is the second song. They had the Beavis and Butthead video. But it starts with Animate, Stick It Out, Cut to the Chase. Love that one. Nobody's Hero, great one. Between Sun and Moon, great song. Damn. It's been a while since I listened to Counterparts. I'm going to have to listen to that one tonight. Nobody's Hero, Between the Sun and the Moon, Alien Shore, The Speed of Love, Double Agent, Leave That Thing Alone, and Cold Fire, and Everyday Glory. Damn! Like I said, I got it Nirvana, In Utero, and Counterparts on the same day. Because, even then, 16, 17 years old, that's what kind of eclectic music taste I had. Damn, Counterparts, shit. I mean, like I said, I loved that tour. But I admittedly haven't listened to that album a lot recently. But now that I'm going through this and looking, man, all those songs were great. I think that was really responsible for, that was the beginning. Of course, it, was hindered by the death of Neil's family members a few years later. But I think that was the album that really brought Rush back from the brink and really brought them back into the public consciousness again. And a lot of bands were doing that at that time. Certainly Kiss did that. There's a lot of bands, after grunge and alternative music started coming out, some of these bands that had taken kind of a softer approach for a few years started coming out with more stripped back records, and Kiss came out with the album Revenge, and they all had like black leather, and, through the 80s, they were wearing the fucking, spandex and makeup and all that bullshit. And then grunge and alternative comes out, and all of a sudden Kiss comes out with they're wearing leather and they're looking, metal looking, and in a different way, Rush kind of did the same thing, because they were, from like Hold Your Fire through to Press Don't Roll the Bones, they were sort of doing kind of a tonal jazzy sort of pop sound. And then, here they come out with Counterpart, heavy guitars. Guitars are way up front in the mix, no synthesizers. And then they come out with Test for Echo. And Test for Echo, again, there's some okay songs. I would have to say, listen, people are saying that a lot of Rush fans will say Presto or Roll the Bones are their worst album. Honestly, I think Test for Echo is their worst album. But again, with that said, there are still some decent songs on it that translated well live. But I'd have to say Test for Echo is probably my least favorite record. But again, it's still got the song Test for Echo. That's a great song. Driven to the Margin of Error. That's a great song. Half the World. That's a great song. Virtuality, I liked that song. It's got Resist, which I didn't like I just didn't like the studio version of Resist. But when they changed it up and made it an acoustic portion of their set, then it became a really great song. And then, of course, that's when you had, after that, the death of Neil's family, and no more Rush until 2002 with Vapor Trails. I've talked about that. I don't really have much else to say about Vapor Trails. Again, not one of my favorite records, but definitely improved by the remix. And then they did Feedback in 2004 for the 30th anniversary tour, and they did covers of classic songs they grew up playing. Summertime Blues, Heart Full of Soul, For What It's Worth by Buffalo Springfield, The Seeker by The Who, Mr. Soul by Buffalo Springfield, 7 and 7 Is by Love, Shapes of Things by Yardbirds, and then Crossroads, which is a Robert Johnson song, but they did more like the Cream, Eric Clapton Crossroads. Man, none of the other live versions I've ever seen of them when they did that from the R32 tour were anything like the version they did in Dallas on the R32 tour. That version of Crossroads they did was unfucking believable. I wish there would have been a recording from that. But that was listen, they just really did that record like they did a lot of their studio records. It was just an excuse for them to be able to tour. Because back then, the record business was still a little bit different back then than it is now. And you had to have some kind of, labels wanted you to have some kind of record out to justify a tour. And they didn't think Rush would sell a lot of tickets for just doing an anniversary greatest hits tour, which was total bullshit. Of course they would. But a lot of people forget that the Feedback album was also in conjunction with the 30th anniversary tour. And then after that, you got Snakes and Arrows, which, like I said earlier, definitely my favorite of the later albums. A lot of heavy, great fucking songs on that. Great lyrics. Some of Neil's best lyrics in many years. Far Cry, Armor and Sword, Working Them Angels, The Larger Bowl. I love that song. Some are blessed and some are cursed. Spindrift. Great song. The Main Monkey Business. That was the closing theme of my radio show for many years. The Way the Wind Blows, another great one. Hope, Faithless, Bravest Face, Good News First, Malignant Narcissism, another great instrumental. And We Hold On. Man, Snakes and Arrows, not a fucking clunker in the bunch. Wow. Not a clunker in the bunch. Probably the first album since Counterparts, really. Really, you could even go back farther than that, probably to the 80s. Snakes and Arrows was truly a great record, man. That's why I really am glad I saw both legs on that. Definitely, I think, the best Rush album of the later period. No question about it. If you've never heard Snakes and Arrows, that's definitely one that you should check out and get. And then that brings us to the final Rush studio album, 2012, Clockwork Angels. Their first attempt to revisit the concept record since Hemispheres in 1977. And Neil seemed to indicate through some of his interviews, because I wondered, and as did a lot of fans, and he seemed to indicate that Clockwork Angels is it does take place in sort of the same universe as the original 3 concept albums did. And if you listen, he kind of indicates that. But it's a concept album. Like I said before, I just didn't like the recording of that record that much. It's overdriven and distorted in some places. But the songs definitely translated better live and translated amazing when they played with the string section on the Clockwork Angels Blu-ray that you can get. There was some in Dallas that I was at. There's some great songs in there. There's some heavy songs. Some of Alex's heaviest riffs in years. Oh, man. Alex, man, I don't know what got into him when they were making Clockwork Angels, but he was just, I don't know if he was been listening to the fucking Black Sabbath or something. Man, he just like really cranked the fucking distortion and the heavy riffs up. What was that song? Carnies? Fuck! Carnies might be one of the heaviest songs they've ever done in their whole history. Oh, damn, that was heavy. Headlong Flight, BU2B, The Anarchist. Yeah, I just didn't like the way that record sounded, but the songs were good. The lyrics were good. And then, of course, like I talked about earlier, it ends with with what will now be the final Neil Peart lyric and song on a Rush studio album, The Garden. And, if you're a Rush fan, and you haven't listened to the song The Garden since Neil passed, go listen to that song and see if you got a dry eye when it's done. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that concludes part 2 of our 2-part tribute to Neil Peart and Rush, my favorite band and my favorite drummer and lyricist of all time. And Neil, you've inspired me more than I could ever say, and I hope I did my best and to express that here in these shows. And I thank all of you for tuning in. I thank Rush for their contribution to the world. And this was cathartic for me. It was fun. It was, just as a Rush fan, somebody who loves their music and has been a fan for as long as I have, and eats, sleeps, and breathes Rush 24/7. This was therapy, man. It really was. And like I said yesterday, grieving is a process, and you got to go through that process, man. You can't ignore it. You can't just go, oh, whatever. Just move on. No, I'm not going to move on. I'm going to continue to celebrate Neil and Rush and their music every day until the day I die. And if you're a true Rush fan, I hope you'll join me in that. I love you guys. We'll see you next time for another edition of the Whenever Whatever podcast. Take care.